History begins as we observe a historical moment. Who would have thought that man would be able to exert such power? A crazy athlete from the very depths of hell. Yuhan Seol, made up of a pile of muscle, is about to turn the history of the WPC and all of powerlifting upside down. He's the first man to ever lift a 10-ton barbell. At the age of 17, he has managed to do just that. He intends to become the world's strongest being, whose power surpasses human capabilities. Suddenly, something strange happens to the athlete. Yuhan Seol drops the barbell, clutches his heart, and falls to the ground. Shocked spectators are worried about the athlete's condition. The voices of medics can be heard from the crowd shouting for help. At that moment, the athlete's eyes darkened and the blue sky became visible. He immediately remembered the doctor's words telling him to be careful. Yuhan Seol thought to himself, would this have happened to him if he had a little more muscle? Although, they say women don't like too much muscle. The thoughts never left the athlete's head. Style? Or muscle? One of the 3 hardest questions in the universe. Yuhan Seol remembers that he should be taking protein right now, not lying on the floor unconscious. The athlete doesn't realize who keeps whispering in his ear. And he can't understand who keeps whispering in his ear. In his sleepy delirium, the athlete hears the clucking of chickens. Finally, he opens his eyes and sees dozens of screaming chickens in front of him. Yuhan Seol is lying on the lawn for some reason, and he's not wearing any sports clothes. But Yuhan Seol used to lift weights, so how did he end up here? Yuhan Seol sees an endless field and huge chickens in front of him. In utter bewilderment, the athlete tries to piece together all the events and understand how he came to be here. In utter despair, Yuhan Seol comes to the conclusion that he ate too much chicken and ended up in a hell filled with Rooster resentment. That must be why there are these huge chickens. The chickens are attacking Yuhan Seol. The furious athlete punches one of the chickens. Yuhan Seol's already pissed off that there's no protein around, and then there's these chickens. But suddenly an idea pops into the mind of an athlete. What if protein is in these chickens? If that's the case, then Yuhan Seol gratefully accepts these gifts and pounces on the chickens with burning eyes. After eating some chicken, Yuhan Seol sat down by a tree to rest. Suddenly, he noticed his hands. Had they always been so thin? And my chest seems to have shrunk. Even Yuhan Seol can scratch his own back now. The athlete can't believe what's happening, because labor can never betray. The results of his labors could not disappear. In utter despair, Yuhan Seol falls to his knees, holds his head and screams. Where did all the muscles go? Yuhan Seol doesn't care where he is at all. In hope, he digs his hands into the tree and tries to lift it up. The athlete succeeds. He has lifted this heavy tree. Motivating himself, he speaks to himself. Yuhan Seol, don't worry, you can do it. Labor never betrays. Yuhan Seol's abilities have gone nowhere. He moves on to jumping squatting. 3 months have passed since then. Yuhan Seol has been training all this time. But he's lost all sense of purpose in all this, because he hasn't gained any muscle. Why does he need to live like this, he wondered. Yuhan Seol has put all his hopes on chickens, because thanks to them, he has enough protein. Everything would be fine, but behind Yuhan Seol's back, a huge rooster appears, dozens of times bigger than normal chickens. The giant asks Yuhan Seol to repeat his monologue about the protein in chickens. Yuhan Seol is totally shocked. He's probably never run away so fast before. He doesn't understand why he's doing this, because he just wants big muscles. The athlete realizes that the giant rooster is fast and strong. If he hits Yuhan Seol once, he's dead. In addition to fear, Yuhan Seol is overcome with envy. Yes, the athlete is now envious of the giant rooster's pectoral muscles, because they are so beautiful that it's impossible to take your eyes off them. The athlete is trying to figure out what contributes to the development of such a sternum. Maybe wings? Or maybe it was worth creating a trainer and doing crossover workouts on it. Yuhan Seol thinks that his muscles are not growing because his strength is not enough, because he emphasized on strength alone. The athlete doesn't understand how he could forget that the abs should be exercised as well. The giant rooster muscles kept the athlete busy and even gave him an incentive not to die. After all, Yuhan Seol also wants such a broad chest. Yuhan Seol continues to run away from the giant rooster. The chickens, which Yuhan Seol called clingy during the race, appear in his path. When the giant rooster heard this, it sped up. Yuhan Seol, fearing for his life, shouted out, "Chickens, forgive me!" In the process of the race, Yuhan Seol somehow miraculously gets a muscle recovery skill. Yuhan Seol changes direction towards the rooster. Usually everyone thinks that muscles appear during workouts, but this is not true. Muscles break down during exercise, and in such a state, temporarily the muscle functions are weakened and hence the strength falls. But if the muscles get the necessary nutrients and rest, after a while they become bigger than they were. And that's called over-recovery. Simply put, muscles become stronger not during training, but during rest. So if recovery is faster, so is muscle mass growth. So the sooner Yuhan Seol builds muscle, the sooner he'll stop being a choker. But suddenly Yuhan Seol pushes himself off the tree and jumps over the giant rooster. The giant rooster doesn't expect it, and crashes into the tree. Yuhan Seol thinks he wouldn't bet his life on it. After all, he always wanted to have sculpted muscles, so he repeated the exercises thousands, millions of times. But suddenly something magical happens. Suddenly Yuhan Seol's hand becomes huge. Without waiting long, he strikes the giant rooster with one hand, touching the rooster's head with his hand. Yuhan Seol felt that there was a penetration, and the head of the giant rooster is being broken into pieces. With happy eyes, Yuhan Seol is already thinking about the giant rooster's brisket. After all, he's eating with gusto today. In the beginning, Yuhan Seol didn't know what kind of place this was or what lived here, and what kind of situation he would find himself in later on. Later that night, when Yuhan Seol is eating a rooster, several creatures watch him from afar approaching him. When the sportsman saw them, he was frightened and asked who they were. They introduced themselves as ghouls and said that they live in this place called alley mines. Guy told his dear ancestors that he doesn't consider humans for meat. But this is the first he's heard of these ghouls. The ghouls said they were looking for the one who defeated Cockatrice. Does he happen to know who it is, they asked? The guy didn't hold it in for long and said that he was the one who rumbled him. When the ghouls heard that, they were overjoyed. To summarize what Dust said, the strongest monster of the alley mines is dead, and now a fight for territory has begun between the different species. While examining the ghouls, the athlete noticed that they have very thin legs. If you hit them, they would break. The ghoul kept saying that Cockatrice wasn't known for his intelligence, but he knew his territory well, and for this reason, they wholeheartedly seek the help of the guy who defeated Cockatrice. Yuhan Seol pretended not to hear and asked the ghouls to repeat the part of the words where they asked for help. A frustrated ghoul said that they had already repeated the words for help 10 times. The angry sportsman said that when you do something, you have to repeat it 10 times. And asked the ghoul if he understood. The ghouls decided to leave. But Yuhan Seol stopped them and said he had to work out and didn't have time to help them. The ghouls did the guy a favor and said they wouldn't waste time either. But Yuhan Seol, in his kindness, offered them chicken breast. After all, he can't eat it all by himself. For the ghouls, this offer was very tempting, for they hadn't eaten fresh meat in a long time. The athlete asked him to forgive him, but the ghouls said it was no big deal, and thanked him for such a gift. Seeing the ghoul lifting the meat, the sportsman got worried and stopped him. Said he might break his back that way. The athlete said ghoul doesn't understand what just happened, because he would now say goodbye to his back for eternity. The startled ghoul immediately apologized. The athlete wondered if they knew how to lift weights, but the ghouls didn't understand what the athlete wanted from them. Taking Yuhan Seol by the face, he realized why they were so suffocating, and he said that once in elementary school a teacher told him that you can only really learn by giving someone knowledge. So if his success in sports stops, let Yuhan Seol try to teach others. Taking this meat with one hand, the sportsman suggested that they eat together, and then go to their habitat. Arriving at the ghouls' settlement site, the athlete was met by one of the ghouls, who also had a skinny body and a sagging belly. The fat ghoul introduced himself as the Lord of the Ghouls, ruler of all ghouls. The ghoul lord asked the athlete if there had been any difficulties on the way here. The athlete gazed intently at the ghoul lord, insulting him that he had long legs and a huge belly like a toad. He immediately noticed that sports were not enough in his life. Lord Yuparai praised the gift from Lord Han Seol. He said he had ordered his subjects to bring the leftover meat as well. When Han Seol heard that, he said, it will take them a lot of time to do it. the Lord laughed. And he said that you shouldn't worry about his servants. Without waiting long, Han Sol said to go right to the point. The Lord said they were in huge trouble for defeating cockatrice. As he sees it, the ghouls are the weakest people in the alley mines. They don't have any hand-to-hand combat, and they don't have much skill, except for me, so they have to eat corpses to survive. When Han Sol heard about the skills, he wondered what he was talking about. The Lord ordered the ghouls to be brought in, which brought Han Sol, ordering his guards to kneel before him. The Uwerians wondered why the Lord had summoned them. The Lord said that sometimes a criminal doesn't realize his guilt, and ordered his subordinates to fetch a bat, swearing unquestioning loyalty to a stronger monster is at the core of our discipline. The Lord said he wanted them to persuade the victor over cockatrice. But they had brought him here and made him a subordinate. But how dare they lie to their Lord, he asked. The Lord sentenced them to pay for deceiving him with their lives, and used the skill of making the bat 2 times heavier. An angry Han Seo stops the bat with one hand and says they distracted him from his training. He also sees that it's not their custom to hurt the weak. The guy asked Lord to answer him, but Lord didn't care about that. He thought he hadn't activated the skill and seemed to have loosened the bat a bit when he released it. After all, the skill and strength had simply weakened. Otherwise, this wretch wouldn't have been able to repel his attack, Lord thought. The Lord said that the guy seems to be quite lucky. So the Lord decided to do him a great honor by showing his skills. With the weighting skill, you can increase the weight of any item from 2 to 10 times. The Lord said he had enough mana to maximize that weight by 4 times. It seemed like pure cheating to the guy. Lord telling Han Sol all these skills strikes him, and eventually the bat breaks into several pieces. The athlete said what Lord calls a skill looks really cool, so he's not even thinking about becoming an enemy. But now the guy said he is most surprised by Lord's character. Trenchless athlete walks up to Lord and uses the unexpected skill of lifting one hand forward and grabbing him by the throat. The guy asked how strong he was to control other people's lives, and on top of that, he wondered how much he could bench press for a set of 3. The fearless Lord asked the athlete does he want to exchange 3 punches with each other. The guy said that the 3 basic super exercises are the press, the deadlift, and the squat. They are the most important. That's why they usually ask you how much weight you have in those 3. When he started the barbell lifting competition, the Lord told the lad not to forget that he had promised to become his subject if he lost. The guy looked at him and advised him to remember to keep his muscles tight so his back didn't snap. Lord laughed out loud and told the athlete that he was unaware that his weighting worked in the opposite direction as well. Taking the barbell, Lord used the skill of weighting 1 to 4. Without any effort, Lord Ghoul took 200 kilograms. A satisfied Lord ceded the barbell to Guy. Guy said Lord surprised him and advised that next time he should engage his glutes a little more. Turning back, the athlete told the ghouls to watch carefully. After all, if he won, he would make them do it too. The guy. To start the competition, he sat on the ground and started warming up, saying that the deadlift is a full-body exercise that allows a person to show the greatest power of sleep he is capable of. Usually everyone thinks that the athlete lifts the barbell using the muscles of the back, but in fact the lower part of the body is most actively used. There is always a risk of injury, said Han Seol, so you need to relax your hip joints and carefully watch your performance and proper technique. The first thing to start the deadlift is to put your feet shoulder width apart and straighten up, the guy said. Secondly, straighten your chest and then tense your back, lower back, cortex muscles and buttocks, assuming the correct position. And in the third ghouls, you need to start lifting the barbell along the horizon line, giving momentum from the feet through the calves and buttocks to the whole body, said the athlete. And fourth, when the barbell is at knee level and suddenly Lord interrupts him and asks if he can lift it, by weighting the bar 4 times. And suddenly, using all his strength, the guy throws the barbell in the air. He says he didn't use enough force. Seeing this, some of the ghouls were surprised and kneeled down and asked the new Lord to take them in. Suddenly, someone shouted, Lord of the Ghouls takes the throne. But the boy noticed that the Ghoul Lord, who had lost in their contest, was listening to him without question. But there are things that the guy learned from the dialogue with the former Ghoul Lord. It was surprising for the guy, because this world was not the same as the one he had lived in before. After all, there is a legend that once in this world, entities can return to their homeworld. But if the athlete returned with this body, he thought, he would be considered a dead man. So Han Seol decided to postpone his return. For in this place called Lesha, the law of the jungle reigns supreme. And for that reason, the Ghoul Lord has sworn allegiance to Han Solo. The athlete told the Ghoul, so as not to be confused, he would be called Old Lord. The Old Lord agreed without resentment. The Old Lord decided to show the place where they train warriors. When he came to the place, he expected something like this. Seeing the physical shape of the ghouls, the athlete asked the Old Lord what kind of training they were doing here. A bemused ghoul said that they had never had such training. Scratching his head, the guy said that a first-class coach can make his own training equipment and train his guys, ordering all ghouls to line up in 5 lines. The boy said that he had heard that ghouls were considered the weakest creatures here and had to live on the scraps left by the other monsters. The athlete said what they need most is strong bodies. From now on and for 3 months with training, he will make fighters out of you. When the ghouls heard these words, they were very happy. From now on, they would not be looked down upon. When he heard that everyone was in agreement, the guy ordered them all to get in a prone position and start doing push-ups, calling them unfit. After 3 hours the ghouls could not find a place to sit, sweat dripped off them like a stream. But suddenly the Old Lord came up and said that there was not a single ghoul left who had survived. The guy ordered them to do another 100 push-ups, but the ghouls had no more strength and started talking amongst themselves about the old Ghoul Lord. When the guy finished the exercise, he told everyone to get up. The ghouls were over the moon, hoping that now they would eat. The guy couldn't stand it, and yelled at the ghouls that with that attitude they were the weakest here. I mean, they said it's like the jungle. And in the jungle, the weak are the first to drop their hooves, said the boy. The guy told the weaklings to get the hell out. But those who stay, he said he'd give them muscle to protect what's most precious. Han Solo wondered, what did it mean to be a real trainer? To be someone who had extensive knowledge of muscles or someone who was able to push his body to the limit? After all, for some it is possible, because they are able to translate their knowledge into unrivaled results. But you can't say they're the best coaches. The best coach is the one who gives a student with zero motivation the will to continue playing sports, telling all the remaining ghouls to believe in him until the day they die. After all, they put all their power out to become the best version of themselves, shouting to the ghouls to do push-ups for their parents, for their health, for their new selves. After that, the will of the ghouls became stronger, and none of them complained anymore. It was because Han Solo's words had hit the mark. And it was at this point, regardless of Han Solo's own will, that his coaching skills reached a new level. 3 months later, the ghouls were being guided in the direction of the hideout by the ghouls, saying that according to the scouts, they were going in the right direction. One of the attackers asked if they would use their combat abilities on them, but the chief said they didn't have to and ordered them to just attack. He raised his knife to the sky and said that this would be the first colony of man-eaters, and ordered everyone into battle. When he saw them on the horizon, the Old Lord said they were humanoid. The boy noticed at once that they had well-developed thigh muscles. The guy ordered all the ghouls to tense their chests like they were going to do abs. Take a deep breath and tense your bellies. Watch the ghouls' targets and attack. Upon striking, the enemies didn't realize what was happening. Wondering who did it, the guy said loudly like this, who? Monsters called ghouls, only no longer the weakest here. Man-eaters saw the ghouls exterminating all of their people. He decided that things would be different if they could capture the ghoul commander. Man-eater sensed the huge mana of the old Ghoul Lord. And yet he's just a ghoul, said he. So they must not lose. He shrieked loudly to the Ghoul Lord, ordering him not to hide behind his subordinates, and to come forward. He invited him to fight one-on-one and determine the winner. The Old Lord was curious and asked Mr. Han Solo how he would react to the enemy's provocation. The athlete recalled an incident when he had an iguana as a child, a very rare species called the sea crocodile, and any minute now, she'd be drooling, demanding to be played with. The teeth of a saltwater crocodile had a clenching force of 7,700 psi, which means more than 2 tons, and even such tremendous force can't break through trained muscles. What we need to do with those pets who won't listen. But suddenly the guy remembered and like a rocket jumped at the human lizard with his bare hands. With the words "admit defeat," grabbing the human lizard, the athlete said to put it on its back first. And after that, you have to look it in the eyes. With a laugh, the man-eater asked the guy to let him go, calling him a crazy asshole. As a child, Guy memorized that animals need to be made clear and understand that their master is strong. The man-eater was angry and begged Guy to let him go, and not dishonor the war. But suddenly he said he was surrendering. Getting down on his knee, the guy said he knew that's what the books said, right? And that's the first victory against a human lizard. A week from Ali's mines was the kingdom of Werdo County. That day, the stranger held out his sword over the bowing men, and said he was honored that their little country had brilliant talents like them. It was the landlord of the county of Werdo who gave them a second-level order to investigate the circumstances of the cockatrice's disappearance. And not to waste their time, the county landlord asked the commander, did he really dare to entrust such an important matter to these yokels? The commander laughed and told him not to worry. Of course, these wars are quite young, but they can safely be called geniuses. Manhwa is widely known for his swordsmanship skills, having destroyed more than one enemy. When it comes to technique alone, he is even better than the sword master in some attacks. Henderd, who is in the same group with him, uses a huge sword. But the sword is practically blunt, but it has such power that it shreds both the enemy and his weapon. The county landlord said those words gave him confidence. And he asked about the simple-minded warrior who stood with him. Was that different too? And about him you can download that he is not good at swordsmanship, said the commander. The county landlord was indignant at what he had heard and asked why he had to send him too. The commander said they'd been friends since they were kids and everything. And those two geniuses are very attached to him. At that time, the wars continued on their way with no suspicion of anything. That they had already stumbled into danger. The enemy sitting in the tree tried to aim at the warriors. But suddenly one of the warriors disappeared and stabbed speech into the enemy from behind. The warrior shouted to his men to be careful, for hobgoblins are also hiding among the goblins. Attacking his enemies, Henderd shouted that the security of the blog comes first. And not even a hair should be allowed to fall from the blog's head. Sitting blog in ambush, the defenders shouted that they were ready to defend it at all costs. After finishing them all off, they approached blog and asked if he was okay, and apologized for letting one goblin pass in his direction. But suddenly there was a dispute between the warriors for putting blog in danger. But blog stood aside and thought they had been practicing together, but somehow he was always the last one. While Han Sol was practicing with his army and the human lizards, one of the human lizards said that he couldn't do it anymore. Ghoul said that nothing can be done. Taking man-eaters for legs, said push-ups with support start from the beginning. After saying goodbye to the man-eaters, Guy suggested that they come back for more training. But it was obvious on the faces of the man-eaters that they didn't want to. The guy saw his warriors and thought about unloading. After all, when you start exercising, muscles get injured, and progress comes as they heal. However, if fatigue builds up in the central nervous system, it reduces athletic effort or leads to injury. To avoid this, you need to give your body periodic rest, which is called unloading. Seeing that after 9 weeks of training the ghouls have slowed down. After all, yesterday they did 3,500 push-ups, and today they stopped at 3,503. Then the guy decided they needed to unload, so he was going to give them a day's rest. But an amazing thing happened the next day. When all the ghouls showed up for training in the morning, Han Sol looked at them and thought they were stronger and taller. I guess the ghouls won't be needing an unloading, he thought. The boy said now that the man-eaters were gone, it was time to prepare a meal. But a friend of the ghouls asked the boy if they could hunt today by themselves. The guy asked indignantly, you decided to skip the training and run away, right? But one of the ghouls said that's not the case. They never encouraged the coax after all, and all this time, they only moved the ones that Master Han Seo brought. Since they had developed pectoral muscles, they might be able to defeat them on their own. The guy gave his fighters permission. And in his head he realized that it was now possible to increase the training time. The old lord standing nearby wondered if the ghoul builders could win. Hearing this, the boy asked who to defeat, but the lost old lord told Mr. Han Sol not to pay attention. He just speculated whether the ghoul builders, by joining forces, could defeat Mr. Han Sol. Putting his hand on the old lord's shoulder, the guy told him not to worry, because a trained athlete would never lose to a rookie. Going to hunt, and the Brazilica Go Builders asked if they have to go like this. The guy only supported them with the words, great, you turned out pretty good. But at the moment of relaxation, the back bends and the position is no longer stable. But suddenly one of the ghouls falls and twists his leg. He screams in pain. When the guy heard that, he told him not to exaggerate, and ordered him to get up while Blog is practicing with his sword. As he thought about it, He remembered that Reaper and Hendard had missed one goblin and apologized for it. Hendar says it's all because of his weakness, so he can't be trusted. If he was strong enough to keep his friends calm, none of this would have happened. Blog told himself that he must become stronger. And during his vacation, he would train with his sword, but suddenly his hand was taken from behind by Reaper and told him to add strength to his thumb and imagine it cutting through the air. A distraught Blog asked Reaper did he wake up because of him? Reaper smiled and said it was all to make Blog feel good. And he pretends not to know about his secret nighttime workouts. Told the Blog that he could consider it feedback to only reinforce his progress. Seeing Reaper's face, Blog told him that he had just blushed. But suddenly Hendar woke up and asked them what the two of them were doing there alone, and without him. Reaper silenced Blog with his finger, and asked Hendar how dare he show up here after putting Blog in danger. An angry Hendar said it was getting late, and if he didn't lie down now, his body would be absorbent cotton tomorrow. And you also need to sleep when your skin recovery rate is at its maximum, then Blog's skin will be even smoother. Reaper admitted that this was an option he had missed. Without taking his eyes off Hendard, he told the Blog that they would go to bed here tonight when they were done. An indignant Blog said no, and asked why they were arguing over his nap time. Smiling Rapper said they were friends. Blog said, and he asked the same thing, why friends argue about such things. But Blog realizes that there is no point in asking them, because they always say nothing. Blog dropped his hands and said it was getting late, and suggested we go to bed. But Hendard shouted to get ready for battle, for the man-eaters were coming. But the chief of the man-eaters shouted to his men to ignore them. Someone was after them, while Mr. Han Seol himself was chasing the chickens. The guy unknowingly started to create a new world order. Sitting in the bushes watching the prey guy asked the ghouls if they could catch them. Compared to you, they have more muscles than you. One of the ghouls told Lord Han Sol that they were just inflated muscles with no strength. When he heard the words, he was surprised and asked where he had learned such expressions. But suddenly one hen running after her prey got stuck between the trees. But this was no obstacle for her, and she broke the two trees into pieces. Seeing this, one of the ghouls decided to prove himself and tried to break two trees, but he failed. He said he had to rest for a minute, and he would try again. But the athlete said he should rest for 3 minutes. Han Seol tells Ghoul that there's no bench here, so with that in mind he should move his foot back a little and try it that way. But Ghoul tried so hard that his big chest went between the trees. But it was all in vain. The guy thought that bench press develops all joints, so its effectiveness is very high. But it's not working out. Like they were doing various push-ups. But where'd he screw up, the guy thought, when he saw the wings of the chickens. Han Sol realized what was wrong. After all, the chickens were making steady progress, so that was the reason why he hadn't noticed the problem. The surprised ghouls asked the gentleman what was the matter. The sportsman said it was his mistake, that they were not even capable of what these chickens could do. The guy said it was because their muscles were used to his workouts. So the guy suggested that they change their workout routine by ordering all the ghouls to line up in 5 lines. And pointing a finger at the crossover machine right behind them, the guy created it to add variety to their usual workout routine. And he started by telling them to clap 3 times. The athlete approached the machine and said that from now on we will do exercises for the inner chest muscles. And when they master this exercise, they will be able to easily fight with their cute hens. Hearing this, the ghouls were delighted by Lord Han Sol's words. Warming him with the warm words of the beautiful lord. Taking off his clothes, the athlete began to explain that the crossover trainer is an exercise designed to engage the inner chest muscles and give them definition. The result will only come when you do it in the right position, so it's the hardest to take the first steps in it. First of all, the guy said, you have to bend your upper body a little bit and duck your knees. Second, without fully extending the arm, fix them so that there is no unnecessary movement during the exercise. Third, once your arms are in the center of the trainer, you should extend your chest slightly and bring your arms together like a bird flapping its wings and cross. Fourth, depending on the position of the ropes and the angle of the lumbar, you can slightly change the area of influence, but counterweights cannot be used, so it is important to fix the body in one position, said Guy. That's all, Han Seol said. If there are any obscure details, you can ask ghouls, saying it's their turn. The guy made some simulators start a new exercise. The crowd of ghouls were very happy about it, and were fighting over the cue. With burning eyes they were burning with this exercise, for they wanted to eat quickly. But suddenly the chickens noticed the ghouls' breasts. And they were surprised by their muscle growth and the fullness of their huge breasts. But to the chickens it seemed like a competition. Suddenly, they caught a ray of sunshine and deformed into more pumped-up chickens. When Guy saw this, he noticed that their chicken breasts had gotten even wider. But that didn't stop the ghouls and they went into battle. But the guy saw his fighters losing the fight. There was frustration in the guy's eyes because he was doing something wrong. One day, Old Ghoul woke up and realized that guarding an empty house was boring. But in reality it wasn't. I felt a rumbling in my stomach. He said that Mr. Hans Seal was good at everything, but he didn't agree with him on nutrition at all, so he decided to make cocoa skin in batter. The ingredients he needs are freshly peeled cocoa skin, breadcrumbs, dried aromatic fruit powder, salt and oil. First, he cut the cocoa skin into strips. If he marinated it right away, it would have a bad smell, so first he had to shake the skin with salt and spices, gently but firmly, like Mr. Hans Soul shakes ghouls, and after that he mixes the breading flour with the spices. That's how you can make this magic powder, and then immediately sprinkle it on cocoa skin. Perhaps even this kind of magic can defeat even Mr. Hans Soul. And after that, if you place the skin on a pan of heated oil, the cocoa guys start to squirt, and when it rendered brown pieces, you can say that the cocoa skin in the batter is ready. While the battle between the ghouls and the chickens was still going on, Mr. Hansio watched and assessed their chances. The ghoul couldn't understand what was wrong. He thought he had pumped up all his pectoral muscles as Master Hans Soul had taught him. But why still couldn't they win, he wondered. The ghouls couldn't figure out what was wrong, or the position was wrong, or someone was looking in the wrong place, or there was a problem with the base in general, they thought. The guy came up to them and said that the main difference between them and the hens is the concentration of time and effort. The ghouls have only been exposed for a little while, but they want to beat the hens who have been swinging all their lives. The ghoul thought about what the athlete said, and realized that such beautiful breasts are not so easy to get. Crossing his arms, Guy said there was still a way to defeat them, and told them to remember how they got to their current form. With stubbornness and spirit, you've made it to this level. But you still need to train steadily. Just because you're a little stronger doesn't take you out of the ranks of the weakest, said the guy. In the land where Guy used to live, squats with a weight of 500 kilograms were his base. After all, you have to train from the roots, only then the strength rises higher. So you'll have to overcome the difficulties. After seeing the ghouls doing their exercises, the guy came over and said that he finally understood the gist of what he was saying. Hans Seal said since pectoral muscles alone can't achieve the pabudu, it might help if you pump up the lower part, seeing the full force and source of the ghoul's energy. Guy to them that they had followed his instructions up to this point. Now it was time for them to show effort and passion, but it didn't work out anyway. The chickens scattered them again. But the ghouls didn't understand what was wrong. The guy again with his words said that by the time they got to this point, their whole bottom part had loosened up. But the realization came too late, said the sportsman. But suddenly he stood in front of the chickens and stared at them intently. Seeing Guy's gaze, the chickens got angry and headed for Guy. When Guy saw this, he used a one-handed push attack and grabbed the chicken. When he got home, the guy said they shouldn't hang their heads. The important thing is that they're making progress. Today you'll have protein and tomorrow you'll be able to catch them yourself, shouting to everyone, together for muscle. Now, whoever has chicken feet in their hands does 300 push-ups each, said Mr. Hans Soul. The boy told his charges that they were still a long way from him, and that they should take into account what they had learned so far and start hunting with caution. The ghouls asked Mr. Hans Soul if he would go with them. Hans Soul said he would train himself first, and then join them. After all, daily training is more important than any battle. Taking the trainer, he felt a very small weight. He thought maybe he should have brought the eldest lord with him. One of the ghouls said that they probably already knew they could induce the coax in today's form. But if, like yesterday, someone evolves, it will become dangerous again. A disgruntled ghoul asked, what should they do then? Just train and come back. He said no, because neither Mr. Hans Seal nor the old lord had told us the clear criteria for victory. Although Coca's is strong, but if it is only one, it can be considered that evening Mr. Hans Salt caught a total of 27 Cocas and Cocas, said Ghoul. So while Mr. Hans Seal was distracted, they would only need to split up and just catch 50 cokes. And we can consider it a psychological victory. The old ghoul decided to split into 3 teams, and if they suddenly encounter danger, we send each other a signal with hard muscles. Looks like the ghouls saw that they'd figured it out, and shouted, "Let's have some fun and have a pledge revolt." Suddenly, a huge skeleton walked towards the warriors. They thought it must be the bones of Cockatrice. Hendard saw Cockatrice's head, which was lying separately. It looked like someone had used powerful magic to rip it off in one blow, he said. Blog said the only one who could magically blow Cockatrice's head off was the king's high mage, Adam. Blog was alarmed by this and asked, "Are they sure they could do the job?" Raper told Blog not to be afraid. After all, they wouldn't let him get hurt. The offended Blog told them to concentrate on their duties, but a friend they heard strange rustling in the bushes and ordered Blog to hide behind their backs. It looked like something was approaching them again, but it was the cocks. But suddenly, out of nowhere, ghouls appeared over the cocks. Reaper told Hendard to stand next to the Blog. After all, this was the first time he had ever seen such monsters, but the ghouls stopped. And one of them said that humans are a cruel people and enjoy killing. After all, they don't know how they will behave. The Blog asked what they were doing. Does this look like some kind of performance to magnify their danger? The ghouls decided to call for a second and third team. After all, quantity can reduce danger. Is rapid muscle growth a blessing or a curse, ghouls thought? If crossed the boundary of one species and also increased the pecs of the cokes. Seeing this, Hendard said that this cockatoo's combat skills were on par with wyverns. Turning back, the chickens attacked the ghouls. But the ghouls realized that they had made the wrong choice and had failed. But the heads of the second and third team flew over the ghouls. They all got in formation and went to fight the chickens, taking all the energy from the lower parts of his body. Ghoul remembered his training with Johann Paul. How he told him to watch his technique. And when you can't perform an exercise in the correct technique, the correct thing to do is to have someone experienced as a safety net. But suddenly the ghouls used an incomprehensible attack, secret bodybuilder's version of ghoul builders, using the back press. The head ghoul is yelling to tear it all up and not worry about the ones in the back, saying they'll put all their muscle power forward. Taking the chicken's head, the ghoul told them to try and endure the roar of their pecs. One of the ghouls said he couldn't get any support, and he thanked everyone for their time together. But the head ghoul yelled out another 0.3 seconds. And that's enough time to know whether someone is of interest or repulsion. After all, 486 seconds had passed from the first encounter until now. That was enough time for the 3 swordsmen to answer the call of the ghoul builder's pecs. Unfortunately, however, the kokas also answered the call. And the huge kokas looked at the warriors with a furious look. The Blog holding ghoul was surprised and frightened, and said that this size is more suitable for a dragon. In a story long ago, there was a dragon. And this ancient dragon was hungry for glory. He was afraid that later dragons would surpass him, so he took extreme measures. And that choice was in the division of power. And that's how today's dragons and cockatrices were born. Hendard said it wasn't a dragon, but with this victory, he can get his mentor's recognition. At that time, unsuspecting Wan Seo was still working out in the sweat of his brow, trying to build up his pecs. But he said that they say that beginner athletes grow muscle faster. But compared to the ghoul builders, his muscle mass doesn't grow. Without upsetting himself, he said that these newcomers immaculately follow him always. It's been 3 months now. They used to be suffocating, whimpering babies, and you had to teach them step by step, like real little kids. But of course they wanted to give it all up, but that too was temporary. And their persistence alone made it so that none of them gave up. But they had developed fine muscles too. It even pleased the boy. But he needed the firm hand of his mentor for some reason today. But suddenly, a ghoul comes out of the bushes screaming, "Mr. Han Seol." He says there's been a catastrophe. The Koki have suddenly evolved, and now they're all in danger. At this rate, they could all die. The guy didn't hesitate long enough to tell the ghoul to show him which way they were going. The guy, taking all the energy, also evolved to the impossible and asked who dared to attack his little ones. He took a big leap and arrived at the battle site. The ghouls were surprised and overjoyed when they saw Yu Han Sol, while the warriors continued to fight the chickens. Reaper told Hendard to distract the enemy, and he would try to hit the vital organs. Hendard used the secret technique of scattering sand. and shouted to Blog that he had bought time with the sand pole and ordered him to run away now. The Blog called him a fool. He said he shouldn't have bought time, he should have attacked. I mean, that would put Raper in danger. Blog got angry and asked why Hendar gave him a thumbs up, and told him to ignore it, just ordering him to fight at full strength. Reaper raised his hands and told Hendard that Blog was paying attention. As Hendard ran away, he shouted to Blog to run away, because even at full strength, they couldn't win. While the ghouls picked themselves up and used the attack of the last principle, a set of united support. The chief ghoul ordered everyone to hold on and have faith in their friends, who went to call for Mr. Han Sol's help. For Mr. Han Sol will surely be here before we fall. And keep one faith on our friends. But Coca kicks in and destroys the ghoul pyramid. It's a shame, says one of the ghouls, but tragedy takes it all away at once. But all of a sudden, Coke is on a scale of punches. Coca screams in pain. When they saw Mr. Ghouls, they were very happy that he came without being late, but suddenly their old lord emerged from the dust. The ghouls were very surprised at his arrival and asked what he was doing here, while Wan So went from place to place looking for ghouls. He kept flying over there, but suddenly the chickens surrounded the old lord of the ghouls. The lord asked them if this was all they could do. The Blog said this monster looks like a ghoul lord. Is he stronger than those birds? Hendard told Blog that he had just seen his powerful attack. The ghouls standing next to the warriors told them to watch carefully. This is none other than the treasure of their village, Mr. Old Lord. The ghouls shouted to Mr. Old Lord that they knew he had a plan. After all, even he, the Old Lord, couldn't handle them just face to face. That's right, said the Old Lord. After all, he made them angry, so now defeat them. Mr. Han Seol, shouting for Mr. Han Sol to come out, he didn't see anyone around. He began to worry why he didn't show up 6 hours before. A ghoul woke up in the ghoul settlements, grabbed his stomach and remembered that he had run out of food, and he thought of going to meet them. For Cockatrice was gone, and there was no danger on his way. 5 minutes ago, he heard the shouts of the ghouls. With an angry shout, he asked who dared to touch them and Han Sol's servants. After all, no one but him and Mr. Han Sol dares to offend the ghoul bodybuilders. The Old Lord, unlike the ghouls, did not participate in bodybuilding training, and yet the Old Lord's position was no lower. But how did he do it? Perhaps the trained ghoul builders were inferior to him in strength, the reason being that the Old Lord had nothing left but to pump up his skills to remain Han Sol's right-hand man. Then one day he discovered that his weighting had reached its maximum level. Weighted 1 in 10. Taking a huge rock, he easily threw it into the sky, and applying the magic weighting to 10, he said, "Die chickens." One of the ghouls cheered the Old Lord with words since he was able to hit them with his punch. Maybe he is as strong as Lord Han Seol. The strict lord thought that not everyone could defeat such a huge chicken in one go, and he was also born a ghoul lord, so it's ridiculous to compare his abilities to normal kids. He pulled himself together, and said he'd fight the winged creatures. Because Old Man Lauder will crush you, he said. But seeing his assertive nature, the hen swung her leg and Old Man Lord flew into the sky. The Blog saw this and decided to apologize to Hendard and Raper for not always laughing at their jokes. Hendard said he is sure he will miss them in the afterlife. But his end will not be lonely, because his friends are with him. Hearing Hendrick's words, the ghouls also every last muscle cell, even if they have to break off to go into battle, thanking Mr. Han Sol for his training. They were so grueling, but they were able to touch a bit of real strength. And went into battle. But if there is rebirth, may they once again have the chance to learn from Lord Han Sol, said ghouls. The boy found the Old Lord and listened to him. He said that their servants were being defeated in battle, and the Lord's last words were to save the ghouls. In the process of fighting, the chickens started to run away. The ghouls were surprised by this, and wondered where they had run to. After catching up with sportsmen, the chickens surrounded him. But Han Sol said to the voices of his ancestors, "You may not continue." For he is now as calm as ever. Hearing the call of the pectoral muscles, the ghouls definitely recognized their master Han Sol. The Blog got curious and asked, "What the hell is this?" Ghoul told him that this was their mentor, leader, and the most thorough master of muscle mass development. Simply put, said Ghoul was their new ghoul lord named Han Seol. And still, Blog's explanation wasn't enough. The chickens were staring at Han Sol so intently that they were ready to eat him whole. But when he attacked him, he used a one-handed push attack and the chicken flew up to the sky. The others saw this and decided to attack as well, but in pairs. The guy had already prepared an army press attack for that. Using the shoulder group, Han Seol seemed to have crushed their legs into several pieces. But the chickens didn't give up on that either, and Guy had to use a fat schwung attack. The athlete was already annoyed by this mess and performed a flip in flight and smashed the chicken's head in the air. The guy said his ancestors told him that hens answer the call of pectoral muscles of rapid evolution. So he managed to call you. And they quickly found Guy. With his pecs, he can go deep into their pecs. But can you do that to him? Asked Guy. But suddenly he got the idea to attack with a CrossFit burpee. As he accelerated, he punched the chicken in the forehead. With a triceps strengthening exercise, he took a log and hit the chicken like it was the last time. Seeing this, Blog asked, and this person is the Lord of Ghouls? With what power does he possess? The guy threw contractions that by the time he got here, his lower body was already exhausted, and realized it wasn't worth stalling. If he could finish them off with just a couple of strong strokes, he wondered. Boy, the old lord kept saying in the kid's ear that he was dying. He asked Han Sol to kill him. He couldn't face the old lord who had helped him with his training all the time. The guy realized that just once he would have to end it all in one strong move. With all his strength in his hands, he used the chest press attack. And he grew so big that the chickens couldn't take their eyes off him. With the entire team behind Mr. Han Seol, the ghouls have stepped up their strength training with support. When he saw the ghouls, the guy was more than strong enough. And with his forward flight, he smeared the chickens. But he was also able to thank the old lord for his help. The ghouls said goodbye to the old lord and discussed amongst themselves that before Han Sol came, the lord was evil, but under Han Sol's leadership, he had become an excellent boss. The guy lying on the ground wondered who was going to help him with his training for the next few days. But suddenly the old lord's voice came out of nowhere. He asked what was wrong with them. For the old lord had decided that it was not time for him to interfere and had decided to take a nap. Seeing him alive, the ghouls and Han Seol jumped on him with hugs. The old lord was frightened by their actions and almost died back. The boy was glad that the old lord had come to see them and asked him to help him with his training. Wars passed through many hardships have come to the village of Werdo County, reporting that Han Sol had single-handedly defeated the Kokaris. And he himself finished off the Kokaris with his own hands. The county landlord said that monsters like ghouls wouldn't be a threat to them, but this guy would be dangerous. After all, they don't know when other species will bare their teeth. We need to think hard about what to do with the guy. The commander asked where Blog had gone. Raper remembered how the alien had tried to hurt Blog, and it was Han Sol who offered to make him stronger than he is now. If Blog agreed, he offered to train with him. Raper said there was nothing left for them to do but give him up. And they asked their mentor to rescue Blog from the clutches of those monsters. The county landlord said he believes the words of the training are some kind of black magic, but there is no information about them. He feels sorry for the captured warrior, but we are such a disorganized country to be in danger in such an uncertain situation. Also, young warriors, your mentor is not so free to give in to momentary feelings, so they leave today and start training with their thoughts. But the commander has ordered Landlord County to send all the warriors into battle. The county landlord had told the commander not to give in to emotion. But the commander was very angry. The commander asked the warriors if they were going to move into battle. After all, this criminal had crossed the line and captured his student. Pulling himself together, the commander ordered Hendard and Reaper forward. Today they planned to clean up the alley mines. On the territory of the training ground ghouls, the guy was introducing a new student, and repeat what he had learned, starting with squats. Blog asked what are squats. The guy said squats are a great sport to help develop your thigh muscles through steady work with your body weight. Simply put, squats are about standing up and sitting down. But in order not to get injured while moving our weight, we need to maintain the correct position. The guy told Blog to spread the heels of his feet pelvic width apart, and to make the knees point toward the middle toes, and then use the pelvis and knees to sit down. Let Blog give strength to the pelvis and hips, and then let him stand up, pushing himself off the ground, said Guy. Seeing Blog do, the guy liked it for the first time. He asked Blog if he'd ever studied. But Blog said he'd only studied swordsmanship. But the guy decided to put Blog to the test, and told him to extend his arms overhead and squat down, and he would put the barbell on top of his arms. Seeing Blog's strength, the athlete shouted to him over and over. And Blog lifted the barbell overhead. The guy was convinced that Blog wasn't weak. The guy looked at him and said that the weight was probably close to the limit. But he got up without breaking his stance. The guy made sure his eyes were definitely not deceiving him. And Blog has an exemplary powerlifting physique. Guy asked Blog. He followed him because he wants to get stronger, right? Blog said of course yes, because he wants to become strong like his friends. But Guy told him that becoming strong like his friends won't work. The Blog said that he actually already knew that. That a regular guy like him couldn't keep up with the geniuses. Still, thank you, Mr. Hansol. After all, even he, under his guidance, will probably be able to at least try to reach for them. After all, Guy had told him that he would be strong in another way. So strong that his friend's pathetic swordsmanship wouldn't compare. An athlete told Blog that he has the best talent in the world. When Blog heard this, he cried, because he had never heard such words before. The ghoul wondered why Mr. Hansol had brought the baby cokes. The guy said you can hunt them too, but only if you hunt them without thinking about the consequences. You might run out of chicken breasts soon, so Mr. Hansol is going to try to breed them before the hunger strike happens. Old Lord said that there was no difficulty to raise cokes quickly, but here in the alley mines, there were almost no monsters that could defeat cokes. Fortunately, we've already become stronger than them, but still, if they evolve, no one but Mr. Hansol can handle them. But Lord Hansol looked angrily at the old lord and said that he had almost disappointed him. After all, they are not weaklings. In training, Mr. Hansol was telling the ghouls to use their thigh muscles to resist gravity, while the old lord trained Blog in the barbell bench press, using a 1 in 10 weight. But suddenly a war came into their territory. The commander saw them and struck with his omniscient sword. The ghouls didn't realize what had happened. The old lord commander asked, "Is he the unscrupulous monster who took his apprentice?" The old lord panicked and said it was the first time he had seen him. In fact, it was the ghoul lord's seats that had been taken away from him. The commander got angry, raising his sword, said he should have just said yes or no. But Guy stopped him and said that even dogs don't bark during sports. And who is he anyway? The commander was surprised that this guy was able to stop his sword with his body. With an angry look, the guy said how dare he leave a wound on his muscles. Commander to realize who is the lord of the ghouls. While Raper was yelling to Blog that they were crouching with their mentor, and were calling him to them, the commander apologized for interrupting the training, and said maybe they shouldn't have lured a foreign student to their side. The guy realized that Blog already had a coach, and he said it was rude to do it that way. The guy smiled and said that as far as Blog goes, he likes training better than fencing. Blog took courage and told his mentor that he enjoyed coaching more than sword fencing. The Blog is grateful that they came after him, but unfortunately he has a new mentor. The commander said there's nothing to be done. Since the drill made the wrong decision, we would have to use force. The commander swung his invincible sword at Guy. But Guy only assumed a stance and deflected the blow. The commander said it hurt his pride. But then he decided to do something else. He decided to fight the sportsman, and whoever won would take him back to his place. The guy laughed, calling the commander auntie. He said he didn't know, but training is not a martial art. It's more like self-education, through defeating the resistance of your own will. The commander said that the kid had defeated cockatrice. Didn't he do it with his friction? The commander asked. The guy said it was just to get the squirrels. He always fights just to survive. In that case, the commander said that his training was of no practical use. When he heard these words, the boy was very angry with him. Simply put, the commander thought that training was useless bullshit. But suddenly Han So lost his temper, and said he would show him what real training was. Looking at them, ghouls wondered who was stronger than Mr. Han So, or this human woman. The blog told them that you can't judge by looking at the physique alone. Still, the mentor was one of the 10 strongest warriors on the continent. Looking at the commander, the boy analyzed her body. But he didn't understand how she managed to wound him. After all, it was impossible to cut his muscles with a sword. The commander wondered what kind of trend martial arts he was teaching his ghouls. And as for her swordsmanship, that's how she uses her combat energy to deal with her enemies. As a senior life comrade, the COO decided to teach Guy a couple of life lessons. After striking at the commander, Guy missed. The commander said it was because the mana color around him was scarlet. Meanwhile, mana turns scarlet in demonic entities. Also, the way Guy fights. Ordinary people don't have techniques that can change the body. The boy disagreed with the commander. After all, the body changes with effort. After all, the commander is not even aware of the basics. But all the time, the commander stood his ground that ordinary people could use battle energy ED mana, pulled out his sword and displayed a martial energy annihilation clinic. Said they supplement the missing power. In other words, Guy's training is completely useless to humans. For humans, it's just useless trash, said commander. Lying on the ground, Han Seol said, the opponent she met today. Tomorrow he will be much stronger than today. With a caustic smile, the commander said that there was no need to worry about that. After all, today's enemy simply shouldn't live to see the next meeting. But the guy got strong and used a brilliant double biceps front attack. And he said that everyone who works out in the gym always gets stronger to beat yesterday's self. But suddenly Guy's eyes lit up, and becoming huge, he said that now it was time for him to teach the team. Reaper and Hendred came up to Blog and said that they had decided they would never see him again, so they brought a mentor. Even though both Reaper and Hendred realized that after this, the Blog would hate them like fools. They said that Blog left them because they were always pushing him. But Blog denied what they said, because he wanted to train. And once he finished his training, he would come home. When the guys heard that, they got excited. And Raper wondered what kind of training he was doing. And since he decided to learn, they would stay with him too. The Blog said that he didn't know yet, as he had only recently started studying. He suggested that they go to the old lord and he would help them. The Blog asked them if they remembered what they learned when they met a mentor and started fencing. Raper shouted legs. That's what Blog said. The exercise they are doing now is also for the legs, especially this part. It's called squats, and it's especially effective for the thigh muscles. After all, Mr. Han Seol said that what matters most is the correct posture so that the exercise is safe. When he saw the Blog putting on heavy weights, the old lord asked if it was too dangerous to increase the weight like this, without any system. At that time, Guy and the commander kept fighting over Blog. The commander kept getting defensive and resentful because the boyfriend was always weakening the force. The guy said it doesn't weaken. It's a force that attracts. But the commander heard some noises nearby. So he asked Reaper what they were moaning about. After seeing Raper and Hendred training, he's gonna see them, and he got in his face and told the kid to take a break. And asked this, what's more training? The athlete said it was a weighted squat, one of his workouts. But suddenly everything turned around and the commander apologized and said that he suddenly wanted to send them to the guy's training. When Mr. Han Sol heard this, he asked her how she felt about the training. Without thinking for a long time, the commander said hot passion. After all, she had seen the pleasure of the guys sweating in training. Seeing the commander's forearms, Guy was surprised and asked what sport she played. It's really nothing. She swings a sword all day long. Maybe that's why it started. But she's the one who wants to ask the guy a question. Is he really okay with teaching his special art for free? The guy said the more people he trains the better. Of course it's okay. If the guy says so, rocking gyms will open up everywhere and research and create new workout programs. And if possible, said Guy, he'd like to see every corner of Sweet Leisure reach the culture of the gym. Upon hearing the boy's goals, the commander said she was interested in him. And when he wants, she is ready to listen to his request. That fine evening everyone was out to dinner. The Blog decided to approach Han Sol and tell him that he probably didn't know it, but discrimination was rampant in Wurdo County, where he lived. And not only species are different from humans, but also magic and other religions. But in other words, it's not just humans who rule over everyone, it's swordsmen. Young men like him, said Blog, is certainly less likely to do this sort of thing. But still he worries about how his and Yupari's feelings might be hurt. Upon hearing this, the guy said it was a serious problem. The Blog suggested it might be worth it to wait a while longer. And then think about a new visit. We went over to where the horses eat. The guy tasted their food and said it was coarse and a little hard. That's the main thing to keep you healthy. When he picked up the oats, he realized they were pure carbohydrates, but only horses eat them. He said it was very serious, seeing Guy tasting the food of the horses. The men standing around him were surprised and called him a barbarian. But suddenly, The old lord came up to them and said that the monsters would be very upset when they heard such a thing. The old lord said that he had tried combining their battle provisions and offered them a taste of his billet. When the men saw it, they were surprised, and the delicate smell beckoned them. When they tasted the dish, they said the sweet flavor had a pleasant spiciness to it. It's the savory flavor of fire. One of the men said he's regained his lost appetite. It's a culinary marvel. The old lord said if they make friends with them, then he will give them recipes. So let them stop insulting the monsters. That evening, the boy decided to approach Ryan. He asked if he remembered that he had promised to fulfill his request. He opened his hand and held it out, and decided he wanted the plant. When he saw it, Ryan asked him if he was talking about cattle feed. Ryan said he heard they were raising cokes. I guess he decided to feed it to them. But the smiling guy said no, they'd eat it. Ryan said he didn't care, but somehow he felt guilty about giving him cattle feed. One of the ghouls said that this lady holds a high place among the humans, and one should not take such a chance just to ask for fodder for the cattle. The commanding officer said they weren't wrong. After all, if he asked, she could give him a lot more than he thought. They can swap their tent houses for real wooden houses. Also, instead of going naked, she can dress them up in real adventurer's armor. But the guy was indignant, and said that it is not good to eat only protein, especially the liver suffers a lot. But eating enough carbs releases glycogen and helps you get tremendous strength. Especially oats, said the guy, which contains a variety of carbohydrates, which means absorption is slower, and the feeling of satiety lasts longer. Colorfulness is low, but nutrients are plentiful, so on the earth where it lived, it was called the king of cereals. When the ghouls heard these words, they wanted to try it. The men thought it was some secret that would allow this foreigner to compare with their commander. Raper and Hendras saw them all bending down to eat and decided to try it too. After all, they saw that the blog was eating too. Raper and Hendra told Blog to spit it out because it was not tasty. But when he looked up, Blog said it tasted good. Seeing the Blog gobble, Guy was convinced that he had great talent, and would surely get stronger quickly. But suddenly the commander came up to the guy and said she didn't know what the guy was talking about. But everyone was happy with what he said. She said she would try to persuade the count to meet his conditions. As they approached the kingdom, the subordinate shouted that Commander Ryan was returning, and for everyone to open the doors. Entering the kingdom, Blog whispered to Guy that it was the county of Werdo, the best on the continent, a realm of discrimination. Putting his hand on Ghoul's shoulder, the guy told them to pose. After all, their bodies look great, so everyone's looking at them. But when they heard Han Solo's order, they immediately began to pose. But the people looked down on them so much that they did not understand why they were so happy. After arriving at the fortress of Werdo, the head asked after training in the Trend Technician, "Will he leave here? Does he want cattle fodder as a reward?" But the smiling guy said it's not cattle feed but oats, and they're the main component of a healthy diet. The head said that the boy's insolent speech made it obvious that he was from a barbarian people. But at the request of the commander and his knights, he made an exception and let them into the fortress. If it wasn't for that request, they'd have been pelted with arrows outside the gate to make them look like hedgehogs. Bowing, the commander said thanking the count for his tolerance. But the angry count said to the guy not to make any fuss here and just quietly, peacefully trained his trainers and left. The happy athlete thanked the count and invited him to come to training when he finished his work. The distressed count realized that the commander was popular, and he was afraid to win over the feelings of the people to his side. But suddenly the count jumped up and ordered his subordinates to call the order of mercenaries of the title. With a snide smile, he said that the commander's guests would bring him trouble. Upon arriving at the soldiers' training field, the coach told everyone to stay put. After all, they are having a special training session today, introducing the new mentor brought by Commander Ryan beside him. His name is Yuhan Seol, Lord of the Ghouls. But suddenly the soldiers began to resent it, and coach said he understood their resentment. Well, if they don't honor him, it's a violation of military law. So think carefully before you do anything. The cheerful guy introduced himself and said he would be in charge of their training today. But the guy resented their looks, because he didn't like them, and ordered them all to fall down and do push-ups. One soldier started to get indignant, calling Yuhan Sol a monster. But upon hearing this, the trainer said that he had come to order the commander to listen to the monster unconditionally during training. Sendo asked his mentor, Did he really think the monster's words were the same as their commander's? An outraged Sendo ordered everyone to stand up. He asked the warriors if they would really listen to the monster. After all, you can't undermine the authority of the people. But the indignant boy asked him what the problem was. Sendo said there are many problems. First, they are human, and they don't obey the monster's orders. And secondly, the practical benefit of these three is useless. There is no reason to give up fencing in favor of some other kind of training. And thirdly, they are human and do not wish to learn barbaric methods of training monsters, said Sendo. But suddenly Old Lord hides and says he'll solve it. The first problem can be solved by Blog becoming an assistant coach. And then they'll be taught by a human. And secondly, Lord doesn't know how much more practical it is than swordsmanship because he's never compared the two. But he suggested a duel in which they would have one monster on their side and one man on the warrior's side. And thirdly, barbaric or not. The old lord offered to settle it in private, calling them arrogant little men. Sendo laughed with a snide smile as he thought they thought he was just a student. After all, he wants to show them the horror of the elite squad of the title under the Count's personal command. But suddenly Sendo didn't start wasting time and attacked the monster. But the monster used a one-handed mode attack and broke his jaw. The guy walked up to Sendo and asked him if he was okay. But the smiling monster next to him said that he flinched. And luckily, he's alive. When Han Sol approached the ghoul, he told him to take it easy, and asked him if he was using his body to show off his strength. But the ghoul immediately apologized. Standing up to the wars, the guy said they lost Dot, and now they have to listen to him carefully. But suddenly Sendo came to his senses, and used his battle energy. He attacked the monster from behind and told it not to dare to order him around. But Old Lord saw that and used a weight attack. And the boy kicked him in the stomach with all his speed. But suddenly the commander came and asked the warriors if everything was all right. But all she saw in front of her was a crowd of warriors. So she thought he must have used magic. But the commander turned to her mentor and said she didn't understand what was going on. She ordered him to report the situation. The mentor said that there was an opinion that monsters should not be listened to, so a competition was held. But our fighter lost in this fight, so there was an opinion that the monsters had cowardly resorted to magic. But the commander turned to Han Sol and asked if he had used magic during the competition. The confident guy said he didn't use any magic. And the mentor confirmed that he didn't feel anything like that either. At that time, the Count was passing by and decided to enter after hearing the unbelievable words. The Count asked on which side the commander was most inclined. The commander said she was on Count Werdo's side. But the Count kept up with her, and asked what words she was listening to now. Seeing Earl Guy thought he had come for a personal training session, and told him to get down from his horse rather. But Guy was stopped by the old lord and told that he wasn't, and ordered him to step back. The Count told the commander that she knew how much he valued her. But the guests she brought were hurting their country. After all, they had damaged one disciple's body and also sent riots among the other disciples. How could he, being the head of these lands, just leave this situation as it was? So the Count decided to put all the responsibility on Commander Ryan, and ordered him into exile for 2 years. When the warriors heard this, they began to resent the Count. But the commander asked them how they dared to defy the Count. Ryan said that she thought they were only yokels who knew how to humiliate others, but they have learned to defy their superiors. So there's room for change. Bowing, Ryan said that she would have to leave to let the new talent germinate. Thanking the Count, she decided to take advantage of his care and go on vacation for a while. So the commander turned to the Count, with his promise that within 3 months, he would receive these monsters. The Count said he would keep his promise. One dark evening Sendo came out of the castle with a sack in his hands. Tossing the sack up, he said a couple more times and he would stop doing this nasty job, while he took out the pendant and looked at his family, telling them to wait, because he would be back soon. But at that time there was a great sorrow in his village. His house, his village was burning in a great fire, and there was a guy on the mountain who was happy about it, saying that their beautiful homeland gladly welcomed them. He got down on one knee and asked his Princess Eliza to dance with him. They danced on the mountain while everything below was on fire, saying goodbye to the commander. God was standing next to her, and she wondered why Blog hadn't left. Blog said there's no practice today. So he asked if he could see a mentor. and Mr. Han Seo gave permission. Commander got the idea to stop by the kids' place on the way out. And the block asked me if I could do that. The Count might find out about it. The commander laughed, and said it was okay. She asked Blog what she thought. She was so weak, not even capable of this. Joyful Block said he trusts the commander. And he will take her to him. The commander noticed that there was more power in Blog's voice than before. The commander said if he got a little stronger, she could marry him. But the block made a joke and said she was 60 years old. Well, the commander didn't like it and she asked, did he decide to talk about age? Does he think he never gets old? While the ghouls were looking for new items to train. When they found the items, they were very happy and wanted to start training again soon. On the way, the commander met the ghouls and asked them what kind of slugs they were holding. They said that Mr. Han Sol said he needed slugs. The commander wondered how he was going to use them. They don't even make medicine, she said. The ghouls called the commander with them and said what's the point of long explanations? It's better to see everything once with your own eyes. The blog suggested the mentor go with the ghouls. After all, they don't know how to explain things. After all, it's better to see everything with your own eyes. When she saw the guy, the commander said she decided to stop by on her way to the exile to see him one last time. Yeah, she was curious what they were doing here. She asked the guy what he was going to do with those slugs. While the old lord was ordering the ghouls to pile up the slugs, the guy said he observed the students on the training field and realized that for their bodybuilding and powerlifting style training would not be particularly effective. And in this case, the best way to train with a sports coach, but the equipment is too little, so he decided to make his own hands. The commander said to create equipment out of slugs, it's kind of like a scarecrow that will need to be cut quickly. The guy said it's not like swordsman training. So the guy asked the ghouls to bring him slugs of any color. The athlete decided to show off, and said when there's a slug around, first of all, they take the little round bit from the inside. And within a few days, it regenerates again. And then, to make them recover, these rounds have to be assembled separately. And in the middle of the slugs deprived of the recovery point, you need to make a hole. After all, these slugs have elasticity and compressibility that is just phenomenal. If you use that elasticity, you can stretch it with your hands. And then it becomes an exercise belt. The commander is probably not aware of it, but with such a belt you can do a huge number of exercises, said Guy. Depending on the color, the compression force is different. So you can develop your own exercises for each pectoral muscle. And you can also use them to learn how to recover and warm up small areas of the body. But suddenly the commander apologized. Hearing this, the guy was surprised and asked why she suddenly changed. The commander said the guy probably didn't know she was on guard the whole time. She wondered if he was pretending to like training very much and was kind to people. But she had noticed that he always threw himself wholeheartedly, without any other thought, into a new endeavor. And she is a proper trainer, brought up by the county of Werdo system, in full discrimination, and that's why she's always going after the count. But she's noticed that the guy's not like that. And she's sure he can bring change to this country. The boy wondered what changes she was talking about. Suddenly a crowd of warriors appeared behind the commander, and she asked him if she could trust him with her boys. Without thinking for a long time, the guy put his hand up and shouted of course. That day, additional participants joined the group. But the winds of change did not just blow near Han Sol. Arriving at the scene of the fire, Count said that it was done by their enemies, zombies from the undead people. But the most dangerous feature of the zombies is their ability to turn people into zombies by biting them. So he ordered his soldiers to be careful, and to make sure that neither they nor the horses were bitten. And raising his sword, the Count said, "Attack!" At this time, a guy standing on the mountain was watching the Count's troops. But he was disturbed by his dogs and distracted by them. "If they show up right now," the guy said, "it could get in the way of Ryan. But either way, these zombies are just expendable." The next day at the training field, the guy gathered all the soldiers and said that last time he had said that there were limits to the amount of power they could spend in a day. And for that reason, he decided that they would not train the muscles they needed. And Mentor said that today, after stretching, they would do abs. But the guy suggested to the mentor that instead of abs he should do CrossFit. But the mentor didn't understand and asked, "What is CrossFit?" The guy said that CrossFit is a training system developed by Greg Glassman. It can be defined as a way of training that involves prolonged workouts of varying degrees of intensity. But in other words, it is a sport aimed at creating a so-called hexagon for the actions of the different functions of your body. Also, if you train in groups, there can be synergy between their students, and also competition, so if the relationship is not too warm, there is no more effective way to find. The guy said he reported the group to the old lord, so they would all check with him. He also wished them to have a full-strength training session today. As we started practicing, everyone was doing great. But at the same time, the Count's army was fighting the zombies. When he heard the same sound again, he asked what it meant. His mentor said that zombies often appear in their villages outside the fortress walls, so the Count is going to deal with them personally. But apparently the enemies were stronger than expected, so someone keeps sending signals asking for reinforcements. Having finished clearing the zombies, the Count lined up his warriors. He said that their sentries had reported that there was an enemy base nearby. The Count suggested that his troops defeat the enemy once and for all, and bring peace to his country. But the Count was approached by his right-hand man. He said, "Aren't they going too far?" The Count laughed and said, "What nonsense. After all, zombies don't have any intelligence, and they don't have strategies either. All you have to do is push them back with force and intelligence." He offered his right hand to see how their father-in-law's warriors were doing against the zombies. But the Count told them not to slow down, for this was a battle of fortitude, ordering them not to stop until they had completely defeated the enemy. But suddenly the army found this guy standing on a mountain. But the guy, with a wave of his hand, let his dogs do battle and overpowered them, saying that the prize now goes to the organizers of this battle, Mr. Ben. But Ben didn't fight, he only gave orders to his dogs. But suddenly the Count saw Ben and swung his sword at him. But Ben laughed and greeted Werdo. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, Ben said. Suddenly, there was an argument between them. The Count asked how he could stay the same, since he couldn't even control the battle energy as freely as Commander Ryan. Ben smiled and said that he hadn't practiced combat energy, but had researched it a bit. He took a syringe and injected it into himself. Well, suddenly Ben's size started to increase. The Count asked if he had gotten to the point of experimenting on the human body. When the Count saw Ben, your condition seemed unstable, and he decided before anyone got in his way, he had to defeat Ben. Using his battle energy, he struck with the ball, and told the unpleasant spirit to go back to the other world. But Ben was so much stronger that he struck back and the Count fell. The Count thought, what speed and power! Well, if he had hit him, the Count would have died on the spot. The Count thought about how he could anticipate Ben's attack trajectory. After all, he was inferior in strength, but Ben outnumbered the Count, and when he struck, the Count was defeated. And he realized that he was wrong, because Ben was too strong. Although Ben had used a completely immoral method, but how did he manage to get such tremendous power, thought the Count. Ben told me it's just the progress of civilization. After all, the Count has always been ignorant of everything but his precious swordsmanship. That's why they become so weak. The Count said that Ben knows Commander Ryan's strength, and how dare he speak of such things. When he heard Ryan's name, Ben laughed and said he knew her strength. But is the Count familiar with the concept of medium? Ben asked. Ben pointed his finger and told the Count to look at the picture of the battle taking place on the battlefield. It's called an equal battle, Ben asked. It's just a massacre in which a far superior force wins. There are some particularly capable guys in every field, but you can't take them as a benchmark. The Count said it's impossible because their elite soldiers can't just lose in this battle. But Ben's patience ran out, and he decided to strike at the Count. But the Count's right-hand man appeared out of nowhere and told him to retreat. The Count ran away with tears in his eyes. Ben laughed and said that he still cared only for himself. The Count's right hand shouted for everyone to retreat, for they had lost, and told everyone to make a force to run to the earldom, and he ordered them to follow the Count and try for the sake of future days to survive. But Ivan himself remained on the battlefield. But it didn't take Ben any trouble to strike and shatter his sword into pieces. But Ben ordered his men not to pursue the warriors, because they already know where they're going next. Because the Count is dumb enough to get them all in one place to take them out on us, Ben said. Riding away on the Count's horse, he felt guilty that it was wrong. But he thought of ways to defeat these monsters and came up with nothing. The Count asked if someone could borrow a military setting, But the Count was approached by the commander of Rumi's squad. She reported that out of 400 soldiers, 347 were killed or infected, 27 were wounded, leaving only 26 unharmed. The Count remembered that there were still 100 warriors in the fortress, and the rest were apprentices or wounded. And the Count thought, how can one fight when there are only 126 men in the army? Commander Rumi asked the Count how about calling Commander Ryan back? The Count said it's too late. If they send men after her now, they won't be able to come at the right time. Rumi asked what the Count thought about joining forces with the monsters currently training in the fortress. Rumi said she heard that Han Solo's representative fights on the same level as Commander Ryan. After all, we give them blood and food. If we ask for their help, it is unlikely that they will refuse to go to battle. The Count said it's a wedge issue. So she suggests defeating a monster with monster powers. That's a great idea, Rumi. 3 days later, the Count and Rumi came to the soldiers' training field. The Count shouted to leave the training and called a general assembly. The guy asked the Count, did he come for individual training? But the Count said no, he came to give them orders, saying that it's time for the filthy monsters to pay for giving them shelter and food. For from now on the Count orders them to deal with the army of zombies gathering in the vicinity of their castle. Pointing his finger, the Count said he would give them a chance to die honorably. The Count promises to grant the head of Han Solo the status of a citizen of Werdo County in a special order. Aren't these the best terms? Asked the Count. After all, now he can brag about his friction as much as he likes. The guy ordered all the ghouls to use the double biceps front pose. When the Count saw this, he asked what they were doing. The guy said it's bodybuilding, one of the concepts behind the concept of friction. You could call it bodybuilding bragging. But the Count got angry and said that there's no time for jokes. If they don't obey his order right now, they will die. The guy said if they die and get injured, because then they won't be able to train anymore. The guy asked if the muscles were damaged, would the Count be responsible? Well, the Count pretended not to understand what he was saying. The Count felt he had to apologize to them. So he said he apologized. Rumi asked the Count if he could try to convince them again. But the Count said no, because it was foolish to think that the monsters would help them from the beginning. The Count ordered Rumi to invite Commander Ox. His character is smooth, but his talent is only slightly inferior to Commander Ryan's. The Count has ordered all military forces to be sent to the fortress gate. After all, he wants to show those bastard zombies the superiority of humans. But suddenly the walls began to shake, and the Count realized the enemy was coming. As he climbed the wall, the Ox commander said that he had received a report that their leader had intelligence. Ben asked what they had to say to him. Ox said they had a larger army, but his men were well trained, and they're protected by fortress walls, which are not easy to cross. Ox said that he is the representative of the Count of Werdo, and wants to challenge the representative of the monsters to a duel, which will determine the outcome of the confrontation. Ben said it would be fun, and he was willing to take the offer. When the monsters agreed, Ox jumped out of the castle and stood in front of them, and asked who would come out of the monster team. Upon seeing the opponent, Commander Ox said that the opponent has a great physique, but he wants to see his abilities. As they clashed in battle, Commander Ox sensed that his opponent was very strong. Without throwing a punch, he was hit back. But suddenly, the opponent spit a substance at the Ox commander. But the commander reacted, because he knew he had to dodge. Ox wondered how on earth he had managed to create such a body. After all, he'd never seen an undead body like his. But his rival's friend turned and started to run. But Ox said it was the wrong choice, and it would all end when one of them died. Pouncing on his opponent, Ox said he couldn't interrupt the sacred duel. But suddenly he gets a low blow from Ben. Ben said he agreed to this fight because he's the only obstacle left in this country. After all, he couldn't even imagine that their purpose was not to draw him out, but he himself and put him in the fight. Ben said, I guess they don't call him a woodsman for nothing. He's got the brains of a bull. With a flurry of punches, he smeared his face with blood, but suddenly Ben decided to spare him, and ordered his dog to throw him to the zombies. The least Ox wanted was to become a zombie. The Count, sitting in the castle, was surprised that even Commander Ox had lost. But Ben shouted at him to surrender, and then maybe he would spare him. But the Count told Ben not to talk nonsense. Does he think the Earl would give the earldom to someone with not a drop of humanity left in him? Ben heard that the Count had reneged on the deal, admitted that he wasn't going to let him live. Pointing his finger at the lock, Ben ordered the doors to be broken down. The frightened count shouted for bows and arrows. But the poor soldiers had never fired a bow and arrow in their lives. Romy asked what should they do next? The frightened count could not say a word, for he knew nothing. And in shame he fled from the castle. Running away from the castle, the count envisioned what he would be called in the future. He remembered the words of his father, who said that running away is an act that only cowards do. He shouted in his mind for everyone to shut up, because he didn't want to run away all the time. He hated running away more than anyone else. Yet even a cowardly commander has dear people he wants to protect. But suddenly he runs into the training field and screams, "Save them!" Grab said he was wrong and apologized for neglecting their coach and for humiliating all of them. The count said he was ready to give his life to save the people and his soldiers of his country, and asked the boy to help them. The guy said he didn't need his life, but for personalized training, he'd have to pay for it. His team's mentor also decided to participate. But Han Seol shouted at them and said that the path was closed to newcomers. The guy said anyone under 403 approaches is banned from the war. Looking at them, Graf knew they had a different organization. But why did the view behind him seem so cool to him? The guy said it's a straight line to the main gate. But judging by the urgency of the situation, let's start interval training. The running guy told the ghouls to maintain maximum strength for 1 minute 30 seconds. Seeing that the monsters were already attacking the humans, the ghouls used the press and saved the mother and child. The child asked his mom, could he also become so strong if he learned to wield a sword? Mom told her son it's not sword art. And when the war is over, they'll ask together what their technique is. Well, when the guy saw the zombies, he didn't understand why they were attacking and growling. But suddenly came the old lord and said that they have no mind or only hunger left. In a word, you can call them walking corpses. The guy said it means guilt-free. Old Town wondered what the guy would do next. The guy said since they were gathering at the main gate, maybe he should push them away with the strength of his pecs, thought he. The old lord said it was an excellent plan. And in that case, he asked if he could take charge of the operation. Taking over the operation, the old lord told everyone to spread out and told the first and second groups to spread out to protect the locals. On the third and fourth group climbed the wall to help fight the human soldiers. And the first group, said the old lord, helping Mr. Han Sol push the zombies outside the fortress. But suddenly, the count ordered the main gate to be closed. He said that even though Mr. Han Seol is pushing back the enemies, but if there is even a small gap left, they will squeeze through and endanger the residents. But Romy shouted that the main gate had already been destroyed, and there was no gate that could prevent them from entering. But Blog and a team of ghouls who couldn't meet the condition brought a big weight to close the gate. Suddenly one of the ghouls told Blog to go first, because one of the ghouls had a large thigh muscle that was worn out and could no longer move his leg. But Blog yelled that we shouldn't give up. But Ghoul said he understood his feelings when he thought of the uniforms of his older comrades. But if he exceeds his current level and overtrains, he could get injured. And if he gets injured, you won't be able to train tomorrow. So leave him and go ahead, said Ghoul. But Blog said that's not the point. After all, how could the remaining ghouls carry this thing? With each step, Blog's eyes slowly clouded over, but suddenly he was relieved. Looking to the side, Blog saw the old lord helping them in moving the weights. The old lord ordered the fifth group to join the Giri group, and ordered the gateway to be closed soon. With slow, steady steps, they reached their destination. The Blog shouted to everyone not to let go of the weights, and confidently they closed the gate. The old lord told all but the first and second groups to now go and push back the zombies along with Han Sol's master. When the guy came to help, he said to tense your pecs a little harder. But from above, Rumi shouted at them to not allow themselves to be bitten by the zombies. Otherwise, they would become undead too. During the battle, the ghouls were so joyful that Rumi noticed how they were having fun, and they were having a lot of fun. But suddenly no one was expecting it, and the zombie bit the guy. He just looked at him angrily, and told him not to mess up his muscles. Seeing the guy punch, Ben was surprised, wondering who he was, and why he was helping people. Emphasizing the boy, Ben sicked his dog on him. As the warriors fought back for Commander Ivan and for Commander Ox, their revenge was very violent. He couldn't stand still, so he climbed up to the castle, showing with his fingers that the enemies are near the tree. They're the ones who started this whole mess. But suddenly the guy used reverse breeding to reach the enemy. When the Count saw this, He said that a miracle was happening before their eyes. Sitting under a tree, Ben watched the war, saying that some and others are all useless. Ben said he didn't want to get involved in the fight, but since there was a new person here, he'd say hello. Looking at each other, they evolved to the point where they began to fight without words. Ben asked the guy why he was in his way, calling him a monster. The guy heard it, and realized it was the monster that was in his way of training. Taking him by the throat, the guy put him on the ground. The guy's power was so strong that even Ben couldn't do anything about it. Using a rock climbing exercise, the guy blazed a new trail by tossing it across the ground. You'll see that Ben loses. The girl decided that she would destroy the source of the danger by transforming herself into something terrible. But suddenly she was stopped by some girl who introduced herself as Auntie Ryan's niece, and her name was Rain. Rain asked the girl, thinking that she could defeat her with her pathetic swordsmanship skills, but there was no uncertainty in the girl's words when she said yes loudly. She said she could do it, while the old lord constructed a slingshot, tightening the rubber tighter and tighter. And when he let go, he applied the weight to 10. The old lord ordered his ghouls to load a new shell, and the first group to see if there were any more zombies left in the village, and the second group was ordered to close the gaps in the main gate and begin the work of rebuilding, and the third and fourth groups were ordered to stop pushing back the zombies and overpower them in hand-to-hand combat. Watching the battle, the Count said how skillfully the field is commanded by that monster with the strange name of Old Lord. A terrifying ability, decided the Count, as if he were towering over the battlefield and watching everyone from there. The Count said that he once heard from grandfather that among monsters there are those who side with humans and then become heroes of legends. The hero of the Fourth Great Demon War, the legendary genius of Wadragon. But why did the Count think of that name, he thought? Ben's blows on Han Solo were useless. After all, he was repelling every blow he threw. But suddenly Ben's +1, nicknamed Bonadu, comes running in. After all, Bedorman is mixed necromancy with wind magic, creating machinery of the highest caliber. Bones flying inside Bonadu, strong as steel, said Ben. They can easily blow the head off a man without a metal helmet. Also, a Bonadu attack like this can't do any damage to Han Solo at all. Ben said the whole point was that it hurt, so he wasn't going to use that method. So everything that happens from here on out is the boy's doing. The boy thought that even though he was getting stronger, Ben couldn't match his arm's strength. But then something strange happens, and Ben takes Guy by the throat. The guy tried to grab onto the muscles of the chest area, but they were too thick that it was impossible to even get a grip. Ben said not even Guy's eyes could track him, but using muscle contractions depending on the fibers attaching the muscles to the bones. Ben was so reluctant to have anyone step in to replace Ryan. He was even saddened to learn that she wasn't going to be there. But muscles can be divided into white and red muscles. Red muscles play an important role in getting oxygen. Ben asked Guy why he chose to intervene, to now face death? But for every blow, Guy used his attacks, using a 5-pronged attack from behind. It was useless to prove anything to the guy, because Ben felt that his attacks were not reaching him. Ben decided if the attacks didn't work, he'd have to hit harder and better. After all, one strong attack and he'd be finished. The guy said the best way to win this battle is to endure the enemy's attacks and wait for him to run out of steam. Meanwhile, Guy poses with his pecs on the side. Back then, Han Solo didn't know that Ben's body wasn't created naturally, and using Zim's attack, they fought an equal battle. Ben realized that Guy wasn't so, and just showed him his power. So Ben decided he needed to avoid a forceful confrontation. The guy thought, even though Ben's muscle mass is great, he didn't realize that in power systems, it's control that matters most. Of course, and Guy himself is unaccustomed with his body changing at breakneck speed, so when this speedy Ben finally runs out of steam. While the battle was still raging, the monster had struck and called the warriors weak. And Romy didn't like it. Romy said they know they're weaker than he is, but the strength is in our friendship, much more than his. When Hendrik saw the rapper fighting the monster, he attacked him from behind. But the monster saw that, and said he was slow. Well, due to inertia, Hendrik couldn't stop, while monster was already behind and didn't try to strike. But all of a sudden, an incomprehensible bolt of lightning skipped by Hendrik's side. When he turned around, it was Han Solo, who had defeated the monster with a single blow. Looking at the monster, Hendrik realized that he was now free to join the ghouls. After all, the monster had already been defeated. At this time, Commander Ryan was spending her vacation at a settlement in the outskirts. But suddenly, a warrior came running in shouting Commander Ryan. Ryan asked what was wrong and why he was barging into a room where a lonely, weak girl was sitting. The warrior said that a terrible tragedy has struck the county. Zombies were attacking the county. He said they needed her help. The commander laughed and said they have an army that can handle them. Why do they need it? The warrior said that anything was possible, but the head of the zombies was none other than Ben. When the commander heard the name Ben, she was surprised. The commander said that there are now 2 shields in the county, a trusted ally named Han Sol, and her favorite niece. And most importantly, a young starlet of the continent named Rain, who has a beautiful beauty. Lates is a dark time on a continent of endless warfare. And for the sake of the ancient elves who were under oppression because of weakness and dislike of activity and disputes, the human physician chose Suk Pill Lates invented and disseminated a way for elves to train and meditate. And now the Lates have already transcended the sport, using elves as a fighting technique. And Rain lived in the elven forest and studied elven latex. In just 7 years of brass exercise, she was able to fully master it. The girl told Rain that there was no way for her to dodge in the air. After all, she would ruin her existence. Remembering Rain's training, she said she wasn't even a match for her. Maybe she should have cut her down like she did the other day, Rain asked. The girl said she doesn't take advice from her enemies. But the evil Rain told her she had to listen. After all, her movement reminded her of her aunt's adventures. Well, if you compare it to Auntie's, she's got a lot of skills. But maybe somewhere in the tip of her beak, Ryan said. Rain shouted to her, let's finish this. Using a hyperextension attack, she went through her. The fight between Guy and Ben was still going on. Guy thought it was time for Ben to tire out. But unfortunately he didn't, and Ben thought there must be a striking difference between their powers. Why couldn't he see any difference? Ben wondered. But an angry Ben asked one soul when he would pass out. Ben said he created the potion to surpass Ryan, so it gives him powers comparable to the Dragon Elder. The guy said it looked like he was just working out harder than he was. Guy said he was trying to change his appearance to provoke him in some other way, but suddenly Ben's body began to change. Ben asked me to give him the injection as soon as possible. But something happened, and he asked why he was fighting the guy in the first place. Ben apologized to the guy and said he wouldn't fight. He thinks it's a waste of time to spend his life fighting. The guy said he didn't want to fight either. He's the one who started it. The guy asked, does he know how many beginners couldn't sign up for training because of him? But suddenly Ben got his head up and apologized and said it was his fault. But he didn't understand why he did what he did. Ben said he only fought to save Elisa, and he's here for revenge. Taking the syringe, he said the problem with this potion is that it's very painful and turns your head into a pumpkin. He realized that he had almost forgiven everyone. This time, even before the side effects kicked in, he could have been completely done with him. Looking into each other's eyes, suddenly Ben saw something in the sky that shone like a star. And he shouted, Eliza? 32 years ago, the county was in warrior territory. Suddenly Ben asked him if he knew why our people had so little mana. Werdo said he didn't even need to know those details. But Ben said he had better listen, for he was the county councilor. Werdo said even if he says he's not listening, Ben will still tell him, won't he? Ben did, and that's right. Ben said, unlike martial mana, energy is quite subtle, so mana becomes more free to circulate, and the more emotions pass through a person. However, in our county, people are very disciplined and also pay a lot of attention to other people's views, so they suppress emotions. Therefore, mana cannot circulate unhindered, and it is impossible to possess a large supply of it. Werdo said they don't need mana. It's better left to the witches. And they're better suited to their fighting energy, based on the inner core and nature of the Werdo. Werdo told Ben to give up his useless magical research, and suggested it would be better to spar for the first time in a long time. Took the sword. Ben said, great, let's warm up. But suddenly Ben opened up and Werdo threw a punch. Suddenly, Ryan's mentor showed up. She reprimanded Ben for not always protecting his back. I mean, he's such a talented guy. Ben said he just wasn't interested in fencing. But his mentor said he just hasn't become a master yet, so he doesn't know how much fun it is. His mentor told him to follow Werdo's example. He's so excited about every training session. The mentor introduced them to her special student, Elise. After all, she is their sparring opponent today. Lisa said that even if the two of them came at her, she'd scatter them with one punch. Well, the guys didn't like those words. What a cheeky girl, they thought. Werdo couldn't even stand it, so he jumped on her. But after hearing the guys call her a wench, Lisa got angry and went into action. But things turned out badly for the guys. Werdo realized that Lisa was not at all like most knowledge. Ben said that he had a dream, and he wanted to marry Eliza. Werdo said she's not interested in weak guys. Can you handle it, Ben? But an overjoyed Ben said he was starting to study from now on. Day after day they sparred with Werdo. And every day Ben grew stronger and stronger. But suddenly one day Ben showed the highest class and defeated Werdo. But suddenly Lisa saw this and asked Werdo, is he really not going to compete anymore? But suddenly Werdo was called by his father, and scolded him for sending him to fencing, and he couldn't even beat a grunt. Werdo said something that he didn't seem to have any swordsmanship talents at all. But his father didn't want to hear that. The father was very disappointed with his son, that he called him even untalented. But Werdo had no choice but to apologize to his father. Werdo went up on the roof and sat in the rain. But suddenly Lisa told him that if he sat there like that, he would catch cold. Werdo said it was all right and gave permission to go. But suddenly she hugged him. When he saw her, Werdo was surprised. Taking him by the scruff of his neck, Lizzie told him to follow her. Watching Lizzie, Werdo didn't understand how she could always smile. Werdo thought she might enjoy meeting him. But what if it's not Ben she likes, but him? Werdo thought. Werdo was sure he could love her more than anyone else in the world. The next day, Morning arrived at the practice field to hear rumors about Ben. That he confessed to Elisa, and she blew him off. Werdo was over the moon when he heard that. He thought he had a chance and ran to Lisa. Werdo was even ready to give up his father and family for such a great love. He was ready to look only at her and make her happy. But when he got to her house, he heard strange noises. But he didn't knock on the door, so he looked out the window. And there he saw Lizzie kissing Ben. Last night, Ben and Elise had a conversation. Ben asked her why she was saying no when she said she had feelings. After all, Elise said she likes guys stronger than her, so Ben decided to take up fencing. Of course, his winning stats aren't impressive yet, but sometimes he wins, Ben said. Eliza held her hands up and began to glow, saying that her entire body had been filled with mana since birth. Well, if there is too much mana, it destroys the physical shell. For this reason, it is necessary to release some mana from time to time. Elise said she's doing it now, hiding from the public eye. But one day, someone's bound to notice her, and she wasn't ready to make the man she cared about an accessory yet. But suddenly Ben put his arm around her. Eliza asked what he was doing. If he didn't let her go, the magic would get on his body. But Ben said that the only one in County Werdo who's studying mana is him. And now, starting now, he's the only one who can solve her problem. Day after day, Ben and Eliza were very happy. But one day Werdo followed Eliza and saw her Manu. The next day Ben saw Eliza lying on the ground covered in blood. And he asked if she was okay. Lisa said she was fine. After all, she suddenly had more mana recently, and it's been happening ever since. Ben was very worried about Elise. He decided that for a while he wouldn't leave the lab for a second. He felt it was time to fulfill his promise to her. All Ben asked was that Lisa hold out until he got back. After all, it wouldn't take long. Ben said he'd recently discovered a substance that enhanced physical performance. But Ben didn't know if she'd take pity on him, or if she'd let him cure her, so he could love her all his life, until the day he died. While walking her dog on the lawn, Eliza met Werdo. But suddenly she smelled a strong odor of alcohol. A drunken Werdo confessed his love for her. He said they were having a good time and were very happy. Well, Lisa said she had no feelings for him as a man. I mean, maybe Werdo misunderstood her. And second, would Werdo love her completely, forcing her to use mana and be a criminal? Elise asked. After all, he pretended not to know, even though he was aware of her situation. Werdo said he wasn't brave enough to rebel against his father then. But now he still seemed scared. A drought came to Erdo, the sun shining so brightly that the ground cracked. The people went on strike and asked the Count to come out and make it rain. These people the Count called the masses. The Count said it would be good if it rained, but he is not God, so he cannot make it rain. Werdo asked his father, and how should one act in such situations? The father asks, Werdo thinks they hate him? No, said the father. They just need someone to take it out on, someone to blame. She also said father had someone who would soon be the object of his anger to take his place. Werdo asked if he could find out who it was. The Count turned and said it was Eliza, with whom his son was in love. The Count thanked his son, for he had never expected that the day would come when his shallow son would help him. The Count said if Werdo hadn't come to him for advice, he would never have known they had a witch in their county. But Werdo was outraged and said it was wrong. How can one do this to whom his son has tender feelings for? Asked Werdo. The Count couldn't stand it and called him a fool, slapping Werdo in the face. And he said how could anyone who was to rule the country give in to any feelings? The Count said that he was sure that if he left Werdo alone, he would do a lot of things. Grad ordered the guards to capture young Werdo and lock him in a room. But Werdo could not stay in the room for long and escaped. He asked for forgiveness, even if it is his will. This time he can't obey him. Even if he couldn't win this girl, still he doesn't have the courage to watch the death of his beloved, said Werdo. When Eliza saw him, Werdo shouted to her. But he could not help her. When the Count's subordinates saw young Werdo, they wondered if he was an ally of the witch. Even though he's the Count's son, if he and the witch are allies, he should be sent to execution. But Werdo turned and ran away. But Ben didn't make it either. And he saw the dead body of his beloved hanging from a pole. To this day, Ben remembers everything and searches for Eliza. Attacking Han Sol, he asks him to get out of the way. But Han Sol manages to attack with a one-handed squeeze. But their fight doesn't end there. Guy makes one last pullover attack on Ben. After defeating Ben, the guy thinks he's gonna go deal with the rest of the zombies. But he's met by that dog Bonadu again. But suddenly Ben uses his remaining strength to lift his warriors into the air. A distraught Rain leaves her rival and says she's not interested in losers. The Count says we can't just let Ben go. He'll be back for revenge. So he orders Ryan to go after him and finish him off. But Rain pulls out her sword and tells Count Werdo that he's finished. The Count sees this and says he thinks she's running with him. Rain asks him what he did to her aunt. But the Count, as always, picks up his feet and runs, but in the way of Rin, Raper and Hendred Warble and ask her to stop. But Rain is so angry, and says they can't be stopped. The guys say they are aware, but sometimes you have to go all the way. But she uses the table Tom stance, and jumps over the nickname. But she's also met by a female commander who says she's not going to let the Count get hurt. Seeing this, Blog also shouts to her to stop. Seeing Blog, Rain says that he used to be handsome in face only, but now he has made his body look good too. But had she ever fallen for his slow attacks? Rain asked. Looking at his hand, Blog thought he had gotten stronger, but suddenly she sees the Count running downstairs and jumps after him, taking her sword in her hand and hoping to kill the Count. A split second and the Count would have died, but Mr. Han Seol manages to grab her leg. And with a pullover exercise he shakes her like a piece of fluff. This same guy realized that by fighting a tough guy, he had misallocated his strength. But Rain wakes up and doesn't know where she is. And the boy said she was inside the Werdo fortress. And Mr. Han Seol asked him to take care of her. Rain asked the little one if he knew where Count Werdo was now. The boy said that the Count was with Mr. Han Sol, dealing with the so-called shadows. The boy was determined to see her off. But it seemed to Raina that the boy was deceiving her. After all, a place like this wasn't suitable for training. Going upstairs, Rain saw Mr. Han Sol and the Count. Han Sol used a teaching called the Santa Claus Sleigh Gate. The Count ordered everyone to gather at the castle. Seeing that all the important people were already there, the Count began their meeting. The counselor said that the first agenda is related to Ben's invasion, and important people of the county died in the battle. Due to the lack of military power, under the laws of wartime, they summoned Commander Ryan from exile, but she refused, claiming some important business. Counselor asked the counselor how he would deal with the vacancies caused by this. The Count said he wanted to bestow titles on Hendred and Riper, the heroes of this battle. What do you think, gentlemen knights? The Count asked. The counselor did not wait long and proceeded with the second item of the day. The townspeople, having seen Mr. Han Mole's contribution to this battle, come to the training field and do bodybuilding. In this regard, a new squad of bodybuilder swordsmen has been created, and Mr. Ghoul is temporarily in charge of the training. Does everyone agree with the current situation? Asked the counselor. When the Count heard this, he burst into flames and said, "Of course we agree. After all, it's great news." The Count expressed great gratitude to Mr. Han Sol for standing with them in defense of the country. But suddenly Guy showed his hand to the Count and told him to wait. Guy walked up to the Count and broke his chair into pieces. The Count asked him what he didn't like again. But the boy only said Trini and pointed to the ghouls. The Count decided to hold the meeting as quickly as possible and ordered to shorten all the points and speak as soon as possible. The counselor said that the third point had to do with Rain. The girl had attempted to kill the Count, but due to the current situation in the country and the Count's good intentions, her punishment would be reduced, and so an order is issued to strip her of her allegiance to the county of Werdo. The Count told Rain that he knew she had ill feelings for him, so if she doesn't like this one, the Count said, he gives her the right to kill him. Even asks her to kill him. But Rahini says she refuses. The Count says a man as untalented as he is has no right to be chief. And the Count gives her the right to judge him. The guy hearing this stood up and asked the Count, does he mean to say he's going to stop working and fully immerse himself in sports? The advisors jokingly asked the country who he would give them to. The counselors wanted to try, because the Count had less military power. The guy couldn't have thought that Graf was so supportive of sports newcomers to his country. The boy was overjoyed. After all, no matter who became the Count, it would always help him to improve his physical shape. The counselors were overjoyed. One was thankful that his mother had not born him into the Count of Werdo's family. The author liked his position very much, but the Count to the counselor to move on to the next item. The counselor said that after that meeting, the Count promised Han Sol to make all the necessary gym equipment. However, the simulators that Han Sol wanted could not be created by the forces of the county alone. But he learned that the Spirit King of the land of Begimos could help with that. The only problem is that no one knows where to find Begimos. When Rain heard that, she said she was a friend of the spirits. She had lived among the elves while she was studying with Latisu, so she had learned to communicate with the spirits. The guy took her hands and said fine and asked him to take her to Begimos. Rain said it was no big deal, but in return would the guy agree to join her in her revenge, she asked. But that's when the timeline popped up and said he asked to kill himself. But Ryan said it wasn't about him. It's about those and for whom our gender family, said Rian. Out of the Illuminati Black Magician's Law. In Pesh, Ben talked to the spirits and said that too much had gone wrong, and he would not make such mistakes again. The spirits told him that they were very disappointed in him, and that's why it's always important to recognize the origins of your enemies. The spirits asked if it was because of Elise. When Ben heard that, he didn't like it and moved into battle. But they didn't realize that the commander Rian was slowly following them. Coming to Begimos, Guy says he wants to meet him as soon as possible. But in response, he gets hit by the defenders. When the ghouls see this, they all run away and only Guy is left to stop his blow. Guy shouted with joy that he really liked this gradual strengthening, but suddenly the earth begins to move and the ghouls think it's an earthquake. But Blog orders everyone to take cover, because he thinks it's the call of the mentor's muscles. The boy ordered the old lord to raise the weight, applying a weight attack to 10. Guy started squatting. Seeing this, Rain asked Ghoul what Mr. Han Sol was doing. The ghoul said it was Mr. Han Sol's leg day, but Ryan didn't understand what leg day was. But then Blog came in and explained that leg day means that he trains the lower part of his body, including his legs. Suddenly a voice said that some funny ants had gotten in. They introduced themselves as the master of the Gaia spirit world and his name is Begimos. What purpose had brought them here, he asked. The guy finished his legs, went into the water, and said that even for muscles the most important thing in the end is fluid. After all, fluid intake action is hugely important for muscle growth. Seawater contains a lot of sodium, Guy said, so it's not good for replenishing fluids. But it must be the sea because the flavor is soft and mild. Begimos asked how he dared to drink the water when he himself was talking to him. How insolent and impudent they are, said Begimos. Begimos said there was no reason to talk to them, and he told them to go and learn some manners. Begimos said this place is a living labyrinth, and without the help of spirits, there's no way to know where the exit is. Plus, here and there inside the maze, they will be welcomed with open arms by golems. Begimos asked if they could break through the ever-changing maze swarming with golems and reach him. Rain used a chest throw forward attack. Begimos said it was useless because there was a higher gravity here. Upon landing on the ground, Rain felt too much gravity, so she couldn't fly through the air. The ghouls all spread out on the wall and tried to push, but it didn't work. Begimos said it was an Earth spirit zone, the territory of gravity and minerals. And this wall cannot be breached with bare hands, said Begimos. The guy kept trying and trying and trying, breaking the wall. They were surprised. The blog said how lucky they were that the wall turned out to be pretty flimsy. The blog prompted the ghouls to destroy the wall based on the cracks made by Mr. Han Sol. The ghouls broke the wall too and said it was breaking down perfectly. However, they wondered how they would deal with the golems. Rain said that according to the duo's legends, the golems' eyes are their core, so if you destroy them, the energy stops flowing. Hearing Rahini's words, the ghouls rejoiced and all went at the golems with their bare hands, destroying their eyes. Looking at the volcano, the boy asked Rahini Begimos if it was there. Rahini said if you believe what the spirits say, you have to lift that thing to meet him. The boy offered to break it, but the ghoul told him not to hurry, for there was a rope tied there. It hasn't taken long for 11 months to pass since From Earth Guy came into this world. He's 17 full years old. You could say Han Seol is quite young. Ghouls saw something strange hanging from the ceiling, looking like a block. But all this time Guy had been hiding his homesickness. Looking at the design, Guy was surprised and said it was an upper body weight block exerciser. The upper block pull is an athletic exercise machine invented in the 1960s by American trainer Andrew Memel. Andrew Memel was holding onto the iron handles and pulling them towards him, and then realized that this movement was very similar to pulling an overhead block lying down, and he felt the need to create a simulator so that this movement could be performed more efficiently and safely. And now there are several types as well as designs of such a machine. When he saw this machine, he immediately realized that it was an upper block puller. The ghouls asked with surprised eyes, "What is it?" Guy told the ghouls to lay out what exercises they did for their backs during that time. The ghouls called one-handed dumbbell work, pull-ups, and barbell work. "That's right, kid." Ghouls helped each other, so and could do pull-ups, said Guy. But usually people don't have training partners, and for people like that to see the effects of pull-ups too, you need a top block pull. The movements are similar to pull-ups, so they are quite comparable, and also quite comparable. And also on this machine you can choose the weight, so this exercise is loved by everyone. Among the back muscles, this exercise targets the scapular muscles as well as the oblique muscles of the back. But if concentration is broken, mistakes can lead to training the forearm or shoulder muscles. The guy said since they have a simulator, do you want to try looking at his example? It was clear from the shouts of the ghouls that they all wanted to. Upper block pull. For the position you need to fix the position so that the body does not rise up. Second, grasp so that the distance between your hands is a little more than shoulder width, and fix the desired body part on the bench. Third, apply force to the COR and lift yourself up with the oblique muscles of the back, not the arms. And then the gaze movement should be directed perpendicular to the trumpet. Fourth, it is important to make sure that the back is not deviated by too large an angle, and you cannot use body resistance. The guy said he thought the weight was too heavy for them, and offered to try it later, and said to go ahead. But suddenly he pulled and the door opened. The Count asked Ghoul, "Isn't it leg day for the gentleman? Isn't it a back swing?" Ghoul said that his physical abilities were not at all like theirs. "But how will he get in when he finishes training?" the Count asked. Finishing the exercise, Old Lord reduced the weight of the door, and told Lord Han Sol to quickly enter. When they walked through the door, they found themselves in a world unknown to them, where there were all sorts of small animals. When Ryan saw them, she said how cute. And she wanted to touch them because she thought they were smooth and soft. But she was stopped by Han Seol and told to talk to a staff member or director before signing up for a jock, rather than touching everything out of a desire for friction. But suddenly some voice said that it couldn't disagree with Guy, that you can't touch anything. He introduced himself as Begimos, the king of the spirits of the earth. The old lord, seeing him, said that he had a belly like the lord. When Begimos heard this, he asked him how dare he compare him to him, to the creatures of the middle world. But suddenly the cat came in and said that the situation was developing in such a fun way that it was hard for her to restrain herself from watching. This dog's name is Rena, and he's one of the supreme spirits of the earth. And the real Begimos is her. And all the workers here are also supreme spirits of the earth. So don't treat them like animals, she said. Begimos said that thanks to Rena's tests they had evaluated their abilities. But what brought them here, she asked? The guy asked her if she could make them simulators. Begimos said if she had the time and materials, she could make anything. Out of joy, the boy said they had a deal. But he was stopped by the Count, and told him that it was wrong to make such a deal. Introducing himself as the landowner of Count Werdo, he asked how they could pay her. Calling her the Great Spirit King Begimos. Begimos said they don't need goods from their middle world. And they don't usually accept payment in goods, but in something else. The Count said no matter what order the King of the Spirits of the land gives, he will gladly carry it out. Begimos said there's been some dirtbag polluting the earth lately. Seems he's strong enough that everyone she sent with this message has gone missing. If you can get rid of that bastard and clean up the land, Belamov will help you. Would there be a guide? The Count asked. Begimos said that so far they had been sending mid-level spirits. And this time they wanted to see for themselves what the situation was. So, the top-level spirit Rena is going with you, Rena said, because she's in charge of maintaining this place. Begimos got angry and said that she knew that Rena was sleeping all day long, and only came out for tasty treats. And Ryan was already so on top of this horrible place. And she thought she had disturbed a hornet's hive. In the name of Oculus, they ordered the capture of Sword Master Ryan. But Ryan sensed that the enemies were well prepared. However, in an ecosystem, everything is connected. So if you're not afraid of bees, you can just enjoy the honey. Ryan's strength was unmatched. Her enemies came towards her, and she defeated them with her strength. But her enemies didn't expect her to be so strong. And with a piercing blade attack, she crushed her enemies. Ryan thought that she had come here for nothing. So she decided to give a couple of pointers to her student. Rena said the spirits could read his memories of the land by eating just a piece of ore. Well, after eating Ruda, Rena said she's still pretty young and her memories are short. Rena asked them to get him some stones that were many years old. And the ghouls immediately went in search of them. But suddenly seeing a stone they decided to dig it out so that it would be more convenient to take it. But the guy put his hand on top of the stone and said that now it was more convenient to grasp. Blog also found a stone and asked, "Is this the stone Rena was talking about?" But Blog decided to pick it up with a jerk, did a couple of squats and threw it away. Rena saw that they had started studying. Rena thought they had forgotten about her assignment. After eating the ore, Rena saw something. But it was all a blur. But suddenly she saw a cave with platinum leading into it. But inside there was a frog, who thought whiskey was the most worthy of names, CWA. And the most valuable gift the gods had given to mankind, and that was alcohol. The cork man said that his master, in addition to giving Frog the place, had ordered him to join the Oculus, and in return for his favor, some reptile has made a joke of it, said the cork man. Frog said he's not a reptile, he's an amphibian. And he doesn't mind joining the Oculus, but he doesn't like the conditions. Frog told his subordinates to get the cork man properly drunk. The whiskey made him scream that he was about to burn. Frog saw him and said he could now see the willingness to negotiate on his face. "We have plenty of booze. And now we can start the meeting," said the CWA. Rena yelled out what she discovered while in a deep trance, and called them middle-world savages. The ghouls were examining themselves. One of the ghouls told the other that his oblique muscles had grown considerably lately. Another said his muscles are just getting in shape quickly, and he said he's seen the opposite, that he's now lifting a lot of weight. The ghouls said that weight was the perfect way to build muscle. But the second ghoul decided that he just couldn't miss those words. The first ghoul said compared to weight is more important and impact. Their argument went on for a long time, and each defended his own. The first ghoul said that if he was going to insist, maybe we could fight once. The second supported him, and said that he wanted to offer him one too. Observers said if you look at the FAS, the oblique muscles are larger on the weight side. But however on the impact side the balance and symmetry is more perfect than on the weight side. But suddenly Mr. Han Sol came in, and asked them what they were doing here. And with a menacing look, he asked if they had pumped all their abs. Weight versus impact, he asked. Better to put all your energy into training and then resting than thinking about it. But the ghouls couldn't decide which was more important. But Han Solo also asked them what was more important than the dumbbell, or the hose. Back or front thigh muscles of war, asked Guy. Or are chest or back muscles more important? The Count, looking, realized what he wanted to say. But usually compare not mom and dad, asked he. The guy told Ghoul that you don't have to think of it as complicated. You can feel the effects by raising the weight. The guy suggested zeroing out the entire workout, which they've done so far, and starting over. On that day, the companions once again felt with all their bodies that only Han Mola could change them. Rena, eating from behind, asked them, are they going to fulfill their duties or not? While Blog thought back to his battle with Rain, but Mr. Han Solo told him if he wanted to get stronger, then he needed to strengthen his auxiliary muscles. The Blog was looking for something in the woods. But apparently he was looking for a slug. So he decided to make a ribbon out of it, and jumped in to catch slugs. Standing Frog in a tree told the Blog that slugs make particularly tasty alcohol. But why would a man need a slug, she asked. The Blog said, probably unbeknownst to the Frog, but you can get stronger with slugs. Frog asked Blog if he wanted to get stronger. After all, their head is a real pro at it. Frog suggested that Blog go with him and meet the chapter. But Ben said he already had a mentor. But things turned around and Blog is sitting with the frogs drinking. The frogs tell him that he probably doesn't drink much in his normal life. KWA said that Blog is already getting stronger. After all, drinking contributes to his gaining strength. The Blog says he can't drink anymore. And the evil KWA hears this, and says he's going to have to pay dearly for his drinking. But after a while, Blog wakes up not knowing where and is very thirsty because he's dried out. Blog tried to get out, but something was holding him. It was so sticky and elastic. But suddenly someone behind him told him he was twitching for nothing. He said the Blog is in the Toad's Feed warehouse, otherwise known as Toad Poison. There's no way to get out of here on your own. That was the commander of the Jasper men. Blog asked the commander why they didn't take their lives right away. The commander said it was to create a dungeon. The dungeon is a land of darkness from where monsters endlessly appear. But in reality, monsters cannot be infinitely created. Utilizing the energy obtained from living beings is the main principle of dungeoneering. In other words, the most important thing for a dungeon is to create and maintain a core that directs energy. So these amphibious creeps fill their warehouses with living creatures. And they said Commander will turn into energy and become part of the dungeon. The Blog asked if there was any argument to be made here. As you can see, the commander said, there's zero chance. The commander told Blog to stop kicking. The more he moved, the faster the energy drained out of him. Blog realized that after all, he was so weak that such a thing happened to him. So he apologized to Mr. Han Solo. The commander asked Han Solo, did the Ghoul Lord Blog speak from the minds of Ali Yu Han Solo? But suddenly the commander also started kicking and told us to get out of there. Blog asked him what he was doing, because he said if we kicked we would die faster. After a while Guy asked where the Blog had gone. The old lord said he hadn't brought the ribbon with him, so he'd gone slug hunting. The guy said Blog could have told him too. After all, he always carries a notebook with him. But Rena came over and said that it was very strange that he still hadn't come back. The guy said he'd be fine. He's not so weak that he can't defend himself. The Count told Mr. Han Solo that they are in the enemy's country. You can't be so calm. The guy picked up a rock and threw it to Graf and said if he didn't like the calm he could do 100 squats. Rena said their target is a Jabo man named Cork. Now he's trying to turn this place into a dungeon. So in this territory, one should not use force. Otherwise, they may thereby help the enemy. The guy thought Toad Frog? After all, frog legs have a high protein content, and that's supposed to be good for muscle growth. The guy asked Rena and where is he located. Rena said he didn't know the exact place. He lives in something like a cave. Suddenly the Count stood up and said he was the master of the search. He said to trust him. Han Solo asked if he'd done all 100 squats yet. That same night, Toad returns with a large sack to the dungeon. He says he will soon make a big army of friends. That night, the commander said that messengers of death had come who were giving them information, but Blog wasn't there yet. The old lord told Guy that Blog hadn't even taken a breast of cokes with him. Would he be able to use the spent squirrels? The guy said the Blog would be fine. After all, he was blessed by nature itself, because Blog has the most dulled taste buds in the world. The fact that they're dulled means he's not selective about what he eats. The only thing Blog can't eat is his parents. But even then, Han Sol didn't exactly say that, but Blog was so hungry that he began to eat the messenger of death. Blog was glad to see the beneficial substances beginning to spread on his body, but Blog started kicking. Seeing this, the commander told him he couldn't get out. But he proved otherwise and got out. The ghouls began to wonder if there was anything good in creating a dungeon. The old lord said yes. After all, a dungeon is an automatic system that allows you to accumulate power, and if you create it once, it expands the area from which you can absorb power, as well as the speed of absorption, so that the creator can gain territory. Why don't people create dungeons? Asked the wager. The count said that people are already suffering from taxation. And if you demand them to give up their life force, wouldn't they revolt? The count said not only can it be created by a small number of people, but it's not easy to preserve it. The count's head was spinning. The ghouls said that it smelled disgusting and was very damp, so not only humans but even monsters couldn't live here. But why create a dungeon in a place like this? Rena said that there are two things you can get from an environment where it seems hard to get energy. First, specifically find a small area to minimize intrusion by outsiders. Secondly, there may be another purpose other than dungeon creation. But in both cases, the process of creating a dungeon is very labor-intensive. While the frogs sang a song that they drink to their heart's content, for alcohol is flowing down their throats. Frog asked if they knew why alcohol was so good. Said that because they have alcohol with them, they can meet such a variety of friends. The frog asked if he was ready to stamp the contract. The guy was silent, so the frog decided to give him another drink. Frog said it was time to create new alcohol and called his friends to the factory. But one of his friends lost his temper and asked for a drink, or he would blow the place up. The class said to get everyone comfortable working, suggested we go shopping for the best ingredients for whiskey. But suddenly the guy met the frogs and decided to help them. But the frogs didn't realize if it was Qua's friend or not. But suddenly the guy said the break was over and suggested we go to the next circle. He told them to keep the rhythm and feel the contraction of the pecs. And while the frogs were working, the guy would tell them to relax their biceps, and to make them pretend they were exercising with dumbbells and the shovels were extensions of their forearms. But suddenly the frogs got angry and asked why they should listen to him. But the guy said that sports equipment should not be handled carelessly, and he offered them a fresh start. But they told the frog that he was not their friend and they were drunk. But the guy asked them what they were even talking about. Didn't they just become workout buddies? The frogs realized he wasn't their friend. So they took the equipment and attacked the guy. The guy said it's not okay to point sports equipment at people, but suddenly their shovel broke. They didn't understand how it happened. After all, this guy couldn't withstand their attack. When the frogs looked up, they saw a big huge creature. And it was Han Seol, who said that he hadn't accidentally misheard. The guy said that to pump muscles to work with weights is of course important, but also to do stretching with the help of rubber bands is no less necessary. Excessive stretching significantly reduces muscle strength. So with modern stretching, you can lengthen your muscles, and then we keep training the right way. If you don't want to stay lean, you have to stretch your torso. KVA tasted the whiskey and said that it was excellent. In other words, they alone were enough to create dungeons without Oculus' help. After raising his glass, the KWA decided that today was the day to toast. So he ordered the drunks to assemble. But suddenly the officers of the Red Hat Order of Drunkards showed up. Cavid asked if he had gathered them here. Then everything was ready to be lit. Qua said that's fine because co-workers should always stick together. Qua said it had been a long time since they'd had fun, so they decided to play a drinking game. Moving into the booze warehouse, we are introduced to Nejiro. He's the fourth dice to conduct the game. And he said that the drinking game was starting and it was time to determine the players of each camp. Finding a living response from 380 creatures depending on the character, they will be divided into 2 camps. The boy didn't understand what it was. Nejiro said that there should be 5 participants in each camp. If no one wants to play as a general punishment, they will receive a 0.1% increase in blood alcohol concentration. A guy asked the ancestors of the gym what the concentration of alcohol in the blood is. The ancestors said that alcohol doesn't directly harm muscles, however, because the liver that processes proteins first breaks down alcohol. And that can interfere with muscle formation. When Yuhan Seol put his hand on Yuhan Seol, he agreed to participate. When Ghoul saw that, he also tried to push, but he was stopped by the Count. The Count said no one should press it because it's enemy magic that could be a trap. After all, there are many other people here besides them. It is best not to endanger them, but to watch the situation safely together with other participants, just in case the Count randomly presses the button himself. The old lord thought that if he didn't participate, then Mr. Han Seol would probably think he was just having fun, so he decided to participate too. Rena was immediately offended that it was enemy magic that created the field and conditions. This kind of magic doesn't have an immediate effect, but depending on the conditions, you can get very serious punishments. Rena said in that case it would be most effective for the 5 strongest to participate. Reina and Rena decided to participate. Nijiro said that the players have been determined. Team A consists of Yuhan Seol, Old Lord, Graf, Rain, and Rena. And Team B consists of Cork, Randeep, Cavid, Pilot, Tailcock. The rules of the game are simple. Players become rabbits, but one from each camp turns out to be not a rabbit but a carrot. Participants in each camp need to defend their carrots and fight the enemy. If their carrot gets grabbed, they're the losers. And the losing team's blood alcohol content rises by 1% and the game is over. So it's more profitable to catch 1 carrot than 3 rabbits. But this game can also involve ballasts. As the KWA started to play, he saw a carrot in their camp. But suddenly he noticed an injured player and demanded support. The senior CWA said they've already sent 10 men that way. Is that a carrot? But Han Seol was there. The boy shouted that he would never let his muscles be destroyed. But the old lord yelled to protect him, because he was the carrot of their team. The Count decided to take it all on himself. But he didn't understand why they weren't after him. The ghouls said that Morse code says the old lord is a carrot, so they ran to catch carrots, thought the Count. But how does the enemy know that they are not running after him? They say old lord is running around yelling that he's a Markovka. Old lord shouts stop them because they look very dangerous. But suddenly Rena's in a fight with some enemy. Didn't ask him if he wielded a ball? The enemy said he wielded a luxuriously smelling magic sword, but Cavid drank a bottle of alcohol and said his magic to create fire armor around himself depending on the strength of the alcohol. And attacking the guy, he used Young Moon's chariot attack, saying the boy would burn to death tonight. But the guy didn't have time to use the hand spread attack on the block. And Cavid was defeated. And he was a rabbit. Mistress asked Killate if she had to do such nonsense. Killate said that it was the terms of the contract with Mr. Cork, so she had to fulfill it. Mistress denied it all. She just wanted to drink and have fun. Killate said she'd sort it out so she wouldn't have to interfere. Killate said that was all right, but asked if Mistress liked her new rabbit toy he brought her. Mistress said she likes it, but she was bored sitting in her room all the time. So she decided to go carrot hunting. Rena used a series of side kicks in a circular motion of her working leg, and his enemy sensed her power. Rena told him not to get distracted when he was fighting her. But then Mr. Cork came in and said there was a carrot. Cork yelled at them not to run away when he was talking to them. But Rena intervened and said that she would take them on alone. But Cork used the attack of the debaucherous song. But Rena decided to cover her ears and twist on the sound wave obeying the vibration. If the cork can be fixed properly it will help reduce the damage, Rena said. Killate asked Mistress if she liked it or hunting rabbits. Mistress said that everyone was so weak, she thought they'd soon get bored. Ghoul told Madame Rain to be careful, because these guys are no joke. He pointed at Mr. Han Seol. The neighborhood asked him if he was okay, and what happened anyway. But the guy said he was falling asleep. But Ryan got angry and said that guy had promised them revenge. Rayhan asked what technique he used to beat him, and what made him fall down. The guy said muscle doesn't increase during training, it increases during sleep, and that is why at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep is necessary for muscles to grow well. However, according to the ancestors of the gym, alcohol prevents the growth of muscle mass. Rain left him to rest. I mean, they still don't know who the carrot is. And whoever she catches is a 50-50th chance. Mrs. said that she thought that Killate would show her an interesting drama, and was looking forward to it. But in the end they see only arrogance. Killate said he'll figure it out. because his magic gets faster when he drinks more. And he attacked Ryan, but he missed. Mistress got angry and told him to pull himself together. Kilate said he was lost and could not drink, for the more he drank the less likely he was to hit his target. Watching Kilate, the mistress said that someone must have already guessed that he possessed illusion magic. Her magic increases the illusion zone depending on how much she drinks. And amongst the illusions, somewhere lurks the real Kilata. Even if she tells them everything, they won't be able to deal with them. Because at the end of the game, this whole field will be under the power of magic. But suddenly it turned out that Rena had bitten the mistress. And Kilate ran to help, but was confronted by Rain's one-leg stretch. Rayhan told them to learn to breathe properly first. Kilata from the team couldn't play anymore. And unfortunately he was a rabbit. But the old lord of the team can't play anymore, because the old lord was also a rabbit. They were followed by Team B's Tailcock. And he can't play either, because Team B's Tailcock was the carrot. And quality punishment for everyone on the B team. Blood alcohol level is up 0.1%. The Count told the old lord that he had perfectly averted the eyes of the opponents. After all, the carrot of the A team was Wordo. Cork was angry, and he wanted another drink. After all, this forest was their territory, and all the energy that came from the battles so far would become the main energy for the dungeon. The Toad's Lair dungeon. Before he left the place, a guy came up to Blog. He asked Blog what he was worried about. Han Seol asked him, "Do you want to pump up your muscles some more?" Blog said that he's not really confident, and thinks he's still too weak. The guy asked him why he thought so, because he looked very good and dignified. Blog said when he was taught proper movements, the guy basically told him about pull-ups and barbells. He could only compete on strength, but his technique is weak. The guy said even though he hasn't been training that long, he already wants to compete with him. The guy told Blog that it wasn't that he had reached his limit. After all, something was bothering him from the beginning, and he asked Blog to raise his hand. The guy asked when Blog pulls up, does he experience pain or discomfort? The Blog said there was no pain, but there was discomfort. The guy said the Blog still doesn't use the dentate muscles, but other muscles have taken over. When they lift the shoulders, they engage the anterior serratus muscles, the rotator cuff muscles, and the trapezius muscles. But when Blog raises his hand, he doesn't use them. That's how the guy figured out his problem, and he'll teach you how to train them properly. Exercises for training the anterior serratus muscles. First, we will take a band and extend our arms forward a little wider than shoulder width. Second, tension on the beach arms so that you feel the tension of the band and will begin to move your shoulder blades. And third, after waiting 3 to 5 seconds, slowly straighten your back while pulling your shoulders back. The guy told Blog to do 3 approaches of 15 reps each day, and then he would feel progress. But suddenly an enemy came to Blog and said that his boss told him to keep this bottle safe. If he drinks this alcohol, his body will become stiff and hard. The Blog said his exercises are very good for strengthening the anterior cingulate muscles, and his throw is getting stronger. And secondly, it improves the overall condition of the body. Using a pulling attack, Blog threw the enemy over himself. Suddenly, the commander ran out of the tent shouting that he had found the core of the dungeon, and he could quietly change everything just by changing the owner to himself. But suddenly an enemy attacks and grabs that core in the dungeon, and he says he did it very easily. The commander is confused and doesn't even know if he should get the hell out of here now. The head of the ghouls ordered everyone into a protective stance, and said that the formation must not be broken. After drinking the first drink, the Quack used the attack of the debauchery song. But the head of the ghouls said to hold on, because if they relaxed, they would definitely lose. But suddenly the guy woke up and said he could hear them all right, because he had just finished exercising his pharyngeal muscle. Quack asked what's with the naked monkey? But the guy used a one-handed bench press and punched Quack, and used a medicine ball over his head. Ghouls saw the guy and said his muscles always look great, because muscles with interrupted muscle synthesis deflect cerebellar signals. But suddenly, the anterior deltoid muscle was out of the control of the brain, and it disturbed Han Sol's condition. The guy activated the rare muscle monster mode. When Quack saw it, he said that he had experienced this before when he was a tadpole. Quack said we should run, but the old lord stopped them and said no. In fact, they can feel it all, and if they don't stop him, everything will be ruined. He decided there was nothing to be done, and made a big army gathering. The old lord said that a temporary alliance was only for this time, ordered the first and second ranks to surround Mr. Han Sol. The red-eyed army ordered to cover Mr. Han Sol's eyes, but Han Seol saw memories when he was training and made his 900 kilograms bench press record. The trainer said that at first glance it looked like he was just doing bench presses. But in fact he was doing the bench press using only the small pectoral muscles. Because any part of the body can be controlled freely if they are trained, the coach suggested that Han Sol try it too. After all, he could discover a new world. But Han Sol refused and said that he was practicing for fun. Kwok shouted to his warriors to block his view so that he would calm down and not be able to move as much as possible. But suddenly there was an elephant. Or said it was like an ant and an elephant fighting. A tremendous release of unconditional power, as told his partner he could handle one side of the leg. But the old lord said he wasn't ready to become a suicide bomber. But Blog landed a punch on Han Sol. Rena said he landed in time and called him an egg. The old lord said that the minimum conditions had been met, and now we had to hold on until Mr. Han Sol was brought to his senses. The guy remembered again the time he broke his cell phone at practice, and told the coach that he couldn't control the power that was overwhelming him. Coach said that whatever Han does, the power he can control can get him in the right direction. The coach said that uncontrolled force is like a deadly weapon and it is very fraught with consequences. The guy thought he'd like it if he got bigger. And he'd love it if he made his body stronger. Why does he look like that? The boy thought. Not a muscle was listening to him. And the guy realized he was a bad student, because all this time, he hadn't been treating his muscles like he should have, and put himself in great danger. The guy was trying to tell the stubborn through Morse code that the first time they engaged the deltoid muscles to perform the arm extension exercise to the side, he was then supportive and helpful. One day a woman was Beller asked him to swap pecs with her, and she mocked him. The guy said he just wanted to see him when he was pumping his armpits. And then he purposely acted surprised, which the guy was very happy about. Ghoul said that he wanted his back muscles to be as broad and strong as Mr. Han Sol's. The blog saw Mr. Han Sol's muscles shaking and responding. God said to massage, and they could not miss this chance. Rena summoned a sand golem, and ordered it to grab Han Sol and not squeeze him hard in all the right places. Rain said she would cover the places the golems couldn't reach. The old lord asked the enemy if there was any fragrant herb that could put a man to sleep. The enemy said there was, because there was a herb named after the flavor, and quickly ran after them. But Quack used the song to put his muscles to sleep. But Blog said it was the sound of a mother whale worrying about her cub, while Muscle Monster continues to roar as he performs 15 reps each. The roar is definitely loud, but it also feels warm and caring, and when the rumbling stopped everyone fell asleep. But suddenly it worked, and the guy came to his former state. He said that he had not felt such a pleasant male fusion for a long time. The next day, the enemy asked Quack how about fighting again. But Quack told him not to talk to him. The guy said if the balance was off, his back would weaken and it would be hard to carry. But Quack felt like he couldn't take the pain now. From Ben's side, the students did everything for the teacher. After all, by killing the Oculus, the risk factors were reduced and everything worked out from the dungeon. But the only thing the Benaras gave was that Elise was resurrected. The commander said it didn't matter, what mattered was that they had to figure it out. When she started the fight with Ben, the commander said that his revenge caused a lot of people to get hurt. Ben said he was left with nothing. But don't act like it's all his fault either. The commander said it was her fault for not stopping him the day he died. But Ben said that they let Elise die, so it's the commander's fault. But suddenly Eliza got in the way and I stopped them. Elise asked why they were going to fight. Because priests are supposed to be able to dialogue. She said to start with uncle she heard that the teacher helped him in everything. Then why is he behaving so rudely, she asked. And swooping in on the commander, she asked. When the commander punishes a student unusually does it with the sacred ball. Well, the commander realized that Lisa was just a shell. And she doesn't have any personal grudges. But if she leaves it alone, it's gonna be a real disaster. But then Ben started apologizing. And asked her to kill him instead, but not Elise. But Ben didn't understand what she had done, and why everyone wanted to kill her. Brian said it was all his fault. And the fact that the entire horizon was destroyed was his fault too. The commander apologized to Ben. And said that Ben realized it wasn't Elise. After finishing the workout, KWA said he would never drink again. It is better to exercise instead of drinking. KWA for an hour before Han Seo found out that he still had a long way to go. The eldest lord walked over to Han Sol and said as they promised to set up a meeting alley mine. The guy said that then you'd have to spend time exercising and watch your diet. When the boy came to Bejimo's, he said he'd fulfilled the promise she'd made. And now it was time for her to fulfill her promise. Bejimo's said they did a great job. But she can't do it because she doesn't have the material. Begimus said let them find the material, and she'll do the whole thing. But it seems like the kid doesn't know some things. And Begimus has very high standards. Hippos said she'd let him pass when he made a bar that wouldn't bend even if 100 tons were put on it. But she knows it's possible, and she also knows where the material to make it is. The material you need is called Hickel. These genera can be found only in the new emerging dungeons. There's a new dungeon nearby. It's not hard to find, but it can be dangerous because no one knows what's there. Count, with all due respect to Bejimos, could she give the humble feudal lord a moment to appreciate her labors? The guy got angry and said they had to get there as fast as possible. The count said he wasn't that strong and could die from most of the attacks. Showing her work, Bigamus said that this armor was worn by the chief commanders during the war with the demons. The armor was light as a feather and impossible for dragon claws to penetrate. But suddenly they saw a pink dumbbell. And the count asked to look at it. As he took his hands he felt very light. Well, suddenly the guy also decided to try taking up the dumbbells. He remembered how he asked the teacher why he ends his workouts with pink dumbbells. Well, Through asked him what he thought about bodybuilding. But the guy only said 3 words: strength, size, and good on the skin. Better yet, he says he sees bodybuilding differently. After all, bodybuilding is a training thanks to which he can lift any weight without any restrictions. But suddenly all the guys were looking at the kid and couldn't understand what was wrong with him. Begimus asked if he was the kid that Kang Dong-jun said he was. The guy asked the teacher. Begunov said he was his colleague too. And he talked about saving the whole world. Someday there will be a kid who will have a hard time lifting that dumbbell. And the teacher asked Bejimos to support him. Begimus asked what was the point of looking for a man who could lift her heavy. The teacher said that only someone who could lift light weights as well as heavy ones would be able to change this rotten world. And the teacher said he knew a kid who could do it. The teacher said as soon as she sees his student, let her pretend she doesn't know anything. Bejimos asked Dongjun now is he going to return to his original world, but he said no, because he has somewhere to go. And now he wants to go to space. With great effort, the boy couldn't lift that dumbbell. Bejimos yelled at him to beat his teacher. The guy asked the hippo if she knew where the teacher had gone. But she said that the teacher had left her a pink dumbbell and disappeared. But she has a feeling the teacher is practicing somewhere. The guy asked if there were any other items his teacher used. After all, the teacher told the guy the more danger he faced, the faster his body improved. But suddenly the boy decided that he needed to practice a little and then move on. But the count felt they were stuck here. The next day they came to their territory. But the older lord didn't like something and asked what was there. Now she said a lot of things happened while they were gone. When Cockatrice disappeared and Han Seo left, there was another power struggle. For a while, he was able to maintain control. But when the orcs came, everything changed. But the orcs could not defeat them until the orc lord of the Red Palm tribe appeared. When the old lord was born, he was considered a special child. He possessed the magic of a poet, and he would become a leader in the future. Well, one day he was attacked by a boar. And his life was saved by an orc of the Red Palm tribe. They were the only ones with magical powers. After that, the Red Palm orc greeted in his own way every time. And with that, he struck fear into the old lord. But suddenly the ghouls signaled that an enemy invasion was coming. The old lord said that today they must rid themselves of their sad past. The orcs kept advancing, but the chief orc told his subordinates to leave only the slaves and the tribe of the Red Palm alive. But suddenly, the old lord used his weighted power to attack the orcs. The orcs were very surprised by this. The old lord said that the enemies are at a loss. If they fight like crazy, they will definitely win. But suddenly the orc said he found the leader of the ghouls. And the battle would end when they captured the leader. But suddenly he attacked Blog. But Blog didn't wait long and used a one-handed dumbbell press attack. The orc realized that the chapter was very strong. But Blog asked him what he was talking about. The orc said that he knew that the half-humans in human form had united the ghouls. Striking the orc, God said that he is not the leader of the ghouls. He is only Han Solo's apprentice to Master Ghoul, and now he will be replaced by the city, said Blog. The orc heard the name and looked at the old lord and said, "It's been a long time since we've seen each other, friend Ghoul." Orc asked if the old lord would remember him. Attacking him, he used his greeting as before. While the consul was doing the workout, he suggested his guys do 100 more pull-ups and then go downstairs. But Graf said that was too much. He asked why only Gyurid doesn't train and get privileges? And why is only Gyurid getting special attention? The guy said that Gyurid is training. And the Count is well aware that training intensity is a stretch. For example, his warm-up is a complete workout for someone. And his workout where he's working out is going to be very difficult for someone else. The guy thinks Gyurid realizes it himself, but his body is not the same as it was when they first met. Now his body is extremely strong. His body is now like that of a monster, said Mr. Han Solo. The old lord said it's not the weakling from before. And he is Han Solo's right-hand man and the best wizard ghoul. Striking the ghoul's back with his sword, he heard a sound to make peace in the minor, for the stubborn needed an effective way to fight. The ghoul said that roosters were the strongest monsters here. Isn't it inefficient to only use them for food? By taming them they could fight together, and thus increase their fighting power. And so the cock rider was born. When I saw this, Blog thought it was bullshit. But the ghouls used the rooster chest press attack and moved into action. The old lord ordered the ghouls to push the enemies along with the riders. After all, it's the old lord's new tactic of chomping down on meat. But suddenly he used a hell slam attack when the ghouls were already rejoicing. The old lord saw this and used gravity magic. After using the Tower of Babel attack, the old lord asked Ghoul to not talk about this Han Solo skill. Okra asked the old lord did he think defeating the Red Palm tribe was the end or something? He just doesn't want to say anything because he doesn't want to fight with them anymore. And he asked if the city of Oklusen knew. The old lord said he had heard the name several times. The orc said that once about her came to their tribe and gave them strength, but then they told him to fly 20% of his life energy every month. He wanted to refuse, but he couldn't because they were holding the whole tribe hostage. The orc did as they told him to, and then watched them for revenge. And then he recognized their abilities and the particularity of their power was in the water bomb, said Orc. But suddenly someone shot Orcus. Blog noticed him and yelled that from the mountain. This guy said he asked me not to use this attack. The guy said he'll leave whoever tells him where Han Solo is. But it looks like he saw a strong spirit in the ghouls. The girl said that there are some people among the Oakless with whom one should be most careful. But the Count couldn't hold back and started to fall. But the girl used point flexibility and grabbed the Count. After defeating all the ghouls, Organa asked him to tell Han Solo not to come back here. Big Imus handed the boy some things. The boy cried. Big Imus said even if they were short she couldn't send him away empty-handed. The Count said he was grateful to her. But there are wonderful items like legendary armor, swords, shields. Why the hell did they take these pieces of scrap metal? The Count asked. The guy asked the Count if he knew what a soccer was. The guy said that they say that if you want to play soccer well it is important to always keep the ball with you. This is due to better understand its shape, weight, texture, and all this knowledge experience is gradually accumulated. After all, the Count said he wants to play better. So let's try now to get stronger tomorrow, said the boy. And the commander's battle kept coming and coming. The enemies kept up with her. But with great strength, she outnumbered them. But suddenly the mercenaries shouted to retreat. After all, they would try to buy them some time. Ben praised the commander. He said that his vitality was overflowing. Ben asked the teacher if she was happy that her students were so happy. The Count told Han Solo to look ahead, for there were some guys running. They were the mercenaries of the titles, and asked Han Solo for help. The Count told them to tell them what happened. The mercenary Talal, the leader of the Tuchula mercenaries, was out of action. They have many comrades who have lost loved ones to the zombie invasion. So they wander around looking for someone to help them get revenge. But they came across the mastermind behind the whole mess. They said the man who helped him was none other than General Leon. The Count said he thought there had been a misunderstanding. General Leon would never betray his country. Grafsky asked if the guy remembered a man named Ben who changed his body to fight. This guy's teamed up with the general. So this man who brought Consol here is helping to commit crimes. But suddenly Blog reached Han Solo. He said he was from the village and there was big trouble there. This guy is holding the old lord hostage. The guy tells the old lord to tell him the information and he'll feel better. The old lord told him it was all useless, no matter how hard he tried, no one would tell him what he wanted. The ghouls said that such pain was nothing compared to what they endured during training. At this time, they suffer indescribable pain they have never experienced before. What they are experiencing now is the worst pain because of the inability to exercise. There is a loss of muscle mass.